Tonight we step quietly into the clayrooms of ancient Mesopotamia, where small tablets once slept beneath broken walls. In the late 19th century, excavators working across Iraq uncovered thousands of cuneiform texts, now studied in places like the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania Museum. Scholars such as Samuel Noah Kramer helped bring Sumerian literature into modern view, not as fantasy, but as fragile evidence pressed by human hands into wet clay. And here, in those wedge-shaped marks, you meet a calm and troubling question. What if Sumerian memory did not begin with the first cities we know, but with older worlds already fading behind them? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the room settles, you may write where you're listening from and what local time surrounds you now. Your mind drifts toward a museum case, dimly lit, cool and still. Behind glass, the tablet is not large. It does not glow. It does not announce itself like treasure from a king's tomb. It is brown, chipped, and almost humble. The colour of dried river mud after summer heat has drained away. Yet the surface is crowded with signs, each mark cut by a reed stylus, each wedge holding a small decision made by someone long gone. You stand close enough to imagine the hand that made it. The scribe bends over the clay, his fingers damp, his breath slow, his eyes trained by years of practice. Around him, perhaps, there is the smell of reeds, wool, oil smoke, and baked dust. Somewhere outside, a donkey complains with perfect ancient timing. Bureaucracy, it seems, was already annoying. But the tablet does not only count grain or sheep. Some tablets preserve stories, lists, hymns, royal names, temple offerings, and memories of beginnings. Records confirm that Sumerian writing, among the earliest known systems in the world, appeared in southern Mesopotamia more than 5,000 years ago. Researchers at institutions like the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago have long studied these tablets as a foundation of urban history. Still, the tablets do something stranger than administration. They remember, not perfectly, not cleanly. They remember in fragments, like dreams pulled from a river. A king appears with a reign too long for ordinary flesh. A city rises, then vanishes into floodwater. A divine council murmurs behind the human world. Names pass before you like shadows on a wall, bright for one breath, gone in the next. It is tempting to read these tablets as simple myth, because myth feels safer when kept far away. Yet myth is rarely only invention. It is memory wearing ceremonial clothing. It carries fear, pride, explanation, and grief. It preserves what a culture cannot prove, but also cannot bear to forget. Here the central mystery opens softly. The Sumerians wrote of an ordered world that seemed to have roots deeper than their own cities. Their stories speak of creation, divine labour, ancient kingship, and a flood that divides one age from another. Later readers have sometimes imagined these as signs of hidden civilizations, older than Sumer, older than the first known dynasties, older than the names history usually permits. The number 8 enters like a pattern seen through mist, not as a tidy modern fact, not as a neat chart waiting in a schoolbook. Rather, it appears as an interpretive doorway, built from old king lists, flood traditions, sacred cities, and the Sumerian habit of placing human life within larger cosmic cycles. The idea of 8 civilizations before ours belongs to the edge of history, where scholarship, speculation, and ancient imagination meet in low light. That edge is delicate. A mainstream historian would tell you, correctly, that no university excavation has proven 8 separate lost global civilizations before Sumer. That is the firm ground. You should feel it beneath your feet. Archaeology asks for layers, dates, tools, bones, houses, seeds, and ash. It does not accept mystery just because mystery feels beautiful. And yet, the tablets still whisper in ways that disturb simple answers. The Sumerian King List, copied by ancient scribes and preserved in several versions, names rulers before a great flood. Some reigns stretch for tens of thousands of years. Scholars debate whether these numbers are symbolic, theological, political, or echoes of older storytelling traditions. The debate remains open, and that openness is where tonight's path begins. A quirky fringe tidbit clings to this subject like dust on a sandal. Some modern writers claim the tablets describe visitors from the stars, engineering humanity for labour in mines. Serious Assyriologists do not accept that as a plain reading of Sumerian language. Still, the popularity of the claim reveals something human and oddly tender. People keep looking at the same broken clay and asking whether our beginning was smaller than we imagined, or much larger. You are not asked to believe every strange claim. You are invited to listen slowly. The tablet rests under museum light. Its edges are rough. Its signs are quiet. No thunder rolls. No secret door opens. Yet the calmness makes it more unsettling. If a civilization wished to leave a message across thousands of years, it might not carve it into gold. Gold is stolen. Stone is smashed. Clay, however, can fall, burn, harden, and wait. So you look again. What do the tablets reveal? They reveal that the Sumerians imagined time as layered, not flat. They placed their known cities inside a longer sacred story. They believed kingship descended from heaven. They preserved accounts of earlier rulers, earlier cities, and a world broken by flood. They held human life within a structure older than any one generation could understand. From there, later minds begin reconstructing a hidden timeline. Perhaps there were not 8 literal empires with banners and borders. Perhaps there were 8 remembered ages, 8 cultural memories, 8 symbolic thresholds between animal, human, divine, and civilized life. Perhaps the number itself is a vessel, carrying what cannot be carried directly. The clay does not answer, it only keeps its marks. You feel the room grow quieter, outside your own window, wherever you are. The modern world continues with its electric hum and small glowing screens. Yet here, for a moment, you are closer to the first scribes than to the noise of the present. You are standing beside them, watching wet clay receive the pressure of a reed, and perhaps that is why these tablets still matter. They do not merely tell you what ancient people owned, counted, feared, or praised. They show you that human beings have always lived with a backward-facing wonder. They have always suspected that the world did not begin with them. They have always sensed old footsteps beneath the floor. In the deep hush of Sumerian memory, 8 forgotten civilizations begin as a question, not a conclusion, not a command. A question pressed into clay, baked by accident, buried by time, and lifted again by careful hands. And now gently you follow it. You arrive in the land between the 2 great rivers, where the air feels wide, pale, and ancient. The ground is flat enough to make the sky seem larger than it should. Heat trembles above the plain. Dust gathers at your ankles. Reeds lean in the marsh wind, whispering against one another like tired scribes exchanging secrets at dusk. Here, the earth does not look dramatic at first. There are no towering cliffs to announce the beginning of civilization. There is only mud, water, sun, and distance. Yet from these quiet materials, Sumer rose with astonishing force. Records from archaeology confirm that southern Mesopotamia developed some of the world's earlier cities, including Uruk, Eridu, Nippur, and Lagash. Excavations studied by major universities have shown streets, temples, workshops, seal impressions, graves, and administrative tablets layered beneath the soil. You walk slowly across a dry mound that was once a city. The mound is called a tell, though you do not need the word to feel its meaning. It is a human hill, made by generations building, collapsing, rebuilding, and forgetting. A wall falls, A family leaves, a temple is repaired, a house is filled with sand. Over centuries, ordinary life becomes landscape. Your sandals press into grit. A shard of pottery rests near a stone, plain and overlooked. Perhaps it once held beer, dates, lentils, or oil. Nothing about it asks to be admired. Still, it speaks of hands, meals, arguments, children, and evenings when smoke curled above low roofs. Civilization is not only kings and gods, it is also someone rinsing a bowl in brown water. The rivers shape everything here. The Tigris and the Euphrates do not behave like gentle lines drawn on a map. They shift, flood, abandon channels, and leave glittering veins of silt behind them. Their gifts are rich, but never free. They feed grain fields and drown villages. They invite settlement, then remind everyone who truly owns the plain. You smell wet clay near the water's edge. It is heavy, mineral, and faintly sweet in the warmth. Men cut reeds for roofing and baskets. Women grind grain with steady shoulders and patient wrists. Children chase birds through the shallows. Fishermen return with nets shining in the low light. In the distance, temple platforms rise like artificial mountains, built for gods in a land without mountains. This is the setting in which the Sumerians imagined older worlds. The landscape itself teaches memory in layers. River mud covers the past, then reveals it. Floods destroy, then fertilize. A city can vanish beneath silt, then reappear as broken brick thousands of years later. No wonder people here believe time could bury entire ages. A mainstream fact rests solidly beneath your feet. Archaeologists have traced the growth of urban life in southern Mesopotamia during the 4th millennium before the Common Era, especially through the expansion of Uruk. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and Chicago have examined how writing, accounting, temple economies, long-distance trade, and social hierarchy developed together. The picture is complex, not sudden. Cities did not fall from heaven fully made, even when stories say kingship did, and yet the stories matter because they reveal how people felt about their origins. In Sumerian thought, the city is not merely a large settlement, it is a sacred arrangement. The temple stands at the centre, not as decoration, but as the hinge between human labour and divine order. The fields, canals, storerooms, workshops, and scribal rooms all belong to a system larger than any one person. You can almost hear that system breathing. The canal water slides through cut channels. Oxen pull wooden ploughs through dark mud. A foreman calls out measures of barley. A scribe marks the amount on clay, because memory alone cannot feed a city. Somewhere inside a temple, offerings are arranged for a god whose statue receives food, clothing, music, and ritual care. To modernize, this may seem strange. To them, it is common sense. Even gods, apparently, have household management issues. A quirky fringe tidbit wanders along the marsh edge. Some enthusiasts have suggested that the oldest Sumerian cities were built on the remains of far older sacred centres, as though each temple covered a forgotten predecessor. Archaeology does show repeated rebuilding at certain sites, especially where sacred importance endured across long periods. What it does not prove is a hidden world empire beneath every shrine. Still, the imagination lingers, because layered temples feel like memory made architectural. The scholarly debate remains careful and alive. Some researchers emphasize local development, showing how villages gradually became towns and cities through irrigation and administration. Others place more weight on networks, migration, trade, and cultural exchange across Iran, Anatolia, Syria, and the Gulf. The question is not whether Sumer existed in isolation. It did not. The question is how many older influences flowed into the plain before the tablets began speaking clearly. That is where the dust becomes interesting. You stand at Eridu in the mind's eye, one of the oldest sacred cities in Sumerian tradition. Its ruins lie low and weathered, but ancient texts gave it deep importance. In some traditions, kingship begins there. Temples at Eridu were rebuilt again and again, each one rising above the bones of an earlier sanctuary. This is not the 8 civilizations yet, not in any simple sense. It is something more subtle. It is the physical habit of ancient people placing new order over older order. The plane is never empty. Beneath every surface, there is another surface. As evening comes, the heat loosens, the sky turns bronze, then violet. Birds move in black lines over the marshes. The city mound darkens, losing its edges. In such light, it becomes easier to understand why memory here drifts into sacred time. The land seems to hold more than one age at once. Present footsteps, ancient walls, buried rooms, lost riverbeds, and imagined beginnings overlap beneath the same dimming sky. You feel the unsettling calm of it. Nothing leaps out, nothing shouts. The mystery is quieter than that. It lies in the patience of mud brick, in the way a wall can vanish back into the earth that made it. It lies in the river's habit of covering human certainty with silt. It lies in the knowledge that every civilization, however proud, is only borrowing its ground. The Sumerians knew this without needing modern ruins to prove it. They watched floods reshape fields. They saw old bricks reused in new buildings. They lived among names, shrines, and stories that claimed great age. Their world trained them to believe that what is visible is never the whole truth. So you continue across the plain as night gathers. The reeds grow darker. The water cools. Somewhere, a clay tablet dries beside a lamp. Somewhere else, a city wall settles into silence. The land between the rivers does not surrender its secrets quickly. It lets them sink. It lets them sleep. And beneath that sleep, long before recorded history, the hidden timeline begins to feel possible. Your ears settle into the soft scratch of a reed stylus pressing signs into clay. The sound is small, almost dry, like an insect moving inside a wall at night. The tablet rests on a wooden board, still damp enough to receive thought, still soft enough to be changed by a hand. And around it, the room smells of river mud, lamp smoke, sheep wool, and stored grain. The first impression is not mystery, but order. Lines are arranged, columns are measured, names appear beside quantities: barley, beer, cloth, labour, animals, offerings, fields. The ancient world is counting itself into existence. It is almost comforting, until you notice that counting can also become a spell. Once a thing is written, it does not vanish quite so easily. Records confirm that many early Sumerian tablets were administrative, tracking goods and labour through temple and palace systems. Scholars at the University of Pennsylvania and Chicago have spent generations cataloguing such texts, showing how writing first served practical needs. The earliest scribes were not sitting around inventing epic poetry by candlelight. They were managing accounts. Ancient civilization, with all its gods and cosmic drama, still needed receipts. Yet even receipts can open strange doors. As writing matures, the clay begins to carry more than numbers. It holds hymns, laments, proverbs, prayers, disputes, myths, royal boasts, and lists of places no longer familiar. A tablet can name a city that later becomes a ruin. It can preserve a ritual whose purpose has grown dim. It can copy an older story in a newer hand, allowing a vanished voice to pass through another generation. You lean closer. The wedges are not pictures in the way a painted scene is a picture. They are compressed signals, disciplined and abstract. They do not invite easy reading. They make the modern eye work slowly. This slowness matters. The tablet refuses to become a quick answer. It demands patience from everyone who touches it. Even across 5,000 years, some tablets survive because disaster protected them. A building burns. Clay hardens in the heat. Shelves collapse. Archives fall into dust. What once meant loss becomes preservation. It is a quiet irony. Fire, the enemy of so many human things, becomes the accidental guardian of memory. That thought follows you through the archive room. You imagine baskets, shelves, ceilings, and tablets grouped by purpose. Some are smooth and small enough to rest in the palm. Others are larger, crowded with dense writing. A scribe may correct a line with a wet finger. A student may copy an old sign badly and hope no teacher notices. Across the courtyard, someone is probably arguing about grain rations. Civilization continues. Then the content shifts again. The tablets begin to speak of origins, not in the blunt language of modern chronology, but through divine decisions, ancient cities, and remembered patterns. Kingship descends. Cities receive authority. Human beings are shaped, appointed, burdened, and fed. The world is arranged from above, but maintained from below. That is a very Sumerian tension. The gods command, while people carry baskets. A mainstream historical fact stands firm here. Sumerian literary texts were often copied in scribal schools during later periods, which means many surviving versions preserve older traditions through educational practice. Universities such as Yale and Oxford have contributed to the study of scribal culture, showing that students learned by copying lexical lists, model contracts, hymns, and myths. The past was not merely remembered, it was trained into the hand. This is important because the hidden timeline does not arrive as one clean revelation. It arrives through copying, recopying, selection, and survival. Some voices were preserved because they were useful, others because they were sacred, others because a school curriculum kept them alive. Many more were lost without ceremony. History is not only what happened, it is what endured the archive. Your fingers hover near a tablet you're not allowed to touch. Museum glass separates your skin from the clay, which is probably for the best. Humans have a charming habit of damaging whatever they love most. Still, you imagine its weight. Dense, dry, slightly uneven. A whole vanished mind resting in something smaller than a modern phone. The quirky fringe tidbit now slips into view. Some modern enthusiasts claim the wedges contain mathematical codes for lost technologies, hidden maps, or accounts of forgotten machines. Professional Assyriologists usually respond with the weary calm of people who have actually learned the language. Most tablets are quite earthly. They mention labourers, livestock, oil, beer, property, offerings, lawsuits, and royal praise. Yet the fringe fascination reveals a real emotional truth. People sense that writing this old must be hiding something, and sometimes, in a quieter way, it is. Not secret machines, not shining engines under the temple floor. The hidden thing is older and more human. It is a memory structure, a way of placing human society within immense time. The tablet suggests that Sumerians did not imagine themselves as simple beginners. Their world appears already layered with inherited sacred places, ancient names, and stories of divine administration stretching beyond ordinary generations. Scholarly debate remains alive over how much these texts preserve genuine early memory. Some historians view the older traditions as political theology, designed to legitimize cities and rulers. Others allow that myths may carry distorted recollections of real environmental upheavals, migrations, dynastic changes, and cultural transformations. The careful phrase is still unresolved. It keeps the door open without pretending the door leads exactly where we want. You listen to the tablet as if it were a shell from a dry sea. It gives back faint sounds, a flood, a city, a king, a god assigning roles, a worker bending under a load, a scribe copying a list of earlier rulers, perhaps not believing every number literally, yet respecting the shape of the tradition. The fragments do not form a simple map. They behave more like scattered lamps along a buried road. Each one lights a little space, then darkness returns. The first lamp shows administration, the next shows ritual, another shows kingship, Another hints at a time before known rulers. Another reveals that memory itself was organized, guarded, and sometimes transformed. It is possible that the 8 civilizations are not nations in the modern sense. They may be imagined stages of culture, 8 remembered arrangements of life rising beneath Sumerian consciousness. River people, builders, flood survivors, star watchers, gardeners, silent ones, fireworkers, and the last buried keepers of order. These are not proven categories from a museum label. They are a narrative reconstruction from ancient patterns, shaped carefully at the border of evidence and dream. The tablet does not object. Clay is patient with human interpretation. Outside, the ancient evening deepens. A lamp flame bends whenever the doorcloth stirs. The scribe lifts his stylus. He has no idea that strangers in distant centuries will study his marks under white museum light. He is not writing for you, not directly. He is completing a duty. He is preserving an order that feels older than himself. That is what makes the moment powerful. The tablet speaks because nobody meant it to perform for the future. It was ordinary, necessary, and local. Yet through its ordinariness, it carries the scent of an entire world. You breathe more slowly now. The signs remain fixed. The room fades around them. Somewhere inside those wedges, ancient people confess that they too looked backward. They too wondered what came first. They too inherited stories they could not fully explain. And in the hush between one mark and the next, the forgotten ages begin to gather. For a moment, it feels as though you are standing beside a list that should be simple. A list is usually a modest thing. It promises order. It offers names in sequence, one after another, as if the past can be stacked like bricks in a wall. Yet this particular list does not behave. It begins calmly, then stretches time until the mind grows quiet. The Sumerian King List is one of the strangest surviving documents from ancient Mesopotamia. Copies of it were found on clay tablets and prisms, written in the old wedge-shaped script of scribes. Modern scholars have studied versions preserved in museums and collections, comparing broken lines, royal names, city names, and reign lengths. It is not a single perfect tablet. It is a tradition, copied and reshaped, passing through the hands of people who believed kingship had a sacred history. You look down at the names: Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larak, Sippar, Shurapak. The names rise like islands from water. They are not only places, they feel like stations on a vanished road, each holding a portion of authority before catastrophe interrupts the sequence. The list says kingship descended from heaven, settled in one city, moved to another, then another. It gives the past a rhythm, almost like breathing. Then the numbers arrive. The early kings reign not for 20 years, or 40, or even 70. They reign for thousands. One ruler governs for 28,800 years, another for 36,000. The total before the Great Flood becomes enormous, almost beyond practical imagination. You pause here, because the tablet has crossed the border between history and sacred time. It is not a mistake you can simply brush away. Ancient scribes were trained people. They knew numbers. They counted grain, fields, workers, sheep, silver, and beer with admirable seriousness. If they wrote immense reign lengths, they did so within a system that had meaning to them. The modern question is not whether a human body literally endured so many years. The question is why memory chose such numbers, and what kind of age they were meant to describe. Records confirm that the Sumerian King List combines rulers known from other evidence with earlier figures whose historicity remains uncertain. Research traditions at Oxford, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania have treated the list as both historical source and ideological text. It preserves political memory, but also shapes that memory into a sacred pattern. It tells cities where they stand in the great order of rule. You feel the room narrow. The tablet is not merely naming kings. It is describing a world before ordinary political time, In that world, authority is not invented by humans. It descends. It arrives as a gift, a burden, perhaps even a chain. Cities do not simply become powerful. They receive kingship, hold it briefly by divine standards, then lose it. The old list does not speak like a modern historian. It does not say, here is the evidence, here are the dates, here are the limits of our confidence. Ancient texts rarely have the manners of academic footnotes, which is rude of them, honestly. Instead, it arranges memory into a solemn procession. The procession matters because it shows that Sumerians imagined political life as part of a much older sacred sequence. Your mind drifts toward the first city named Eridu. In Sumerian tradition, it is ancient even among ancient places. The city lies low in the southern plain, associated with wisdom, fresh water, and beginnings. Archaeology shows long occupation and repeated temple building there, layer upon layer. The physical record does not prove those vast reigns, but it does confirm a deep continuity of sacred attention. That is the first door. If Eridu marks a remembered beginning, then the pre-flood kings become more than impossible rulers. They become figures standing at the entrance of another kind of time. Their long reigns may symbolize cosmic order, ideal kingship, or the immense stretch of cultural memory before urban dynasties became historically visible. This is where the hidden timeline begins to widen under your feet. A quirky fringe tidbit rests here like a small scorpion under a stone. Some modern interpreters have claimed that the enormous reign lengths are literal records of non-human rulers or beings with unnatural lifespans. Academic specialists do not read the list that way. They usually understand the numbers as symbolic, theological, mathematical, or royal exaggeration. Still, the claim survives because the text itself leaves an eerie impression. It does not sound ordinary. It was not meant to. The scholarly debate remains open in a quieter form. Some historians see the pre-flood section as mythic framing, created to give later kings sacred legitimacy. Others suggest that certain names or city sequences might preserve blurred memories of early centres, leadership traditions, or environmental crises before writing became regular. No careful scholar needs to accept literal 30,000-year reigns. Yet many admit the list contains older materials shaped by later political imagination. You follow the sequence city by city. Kingship begins, moves, settles, and moves again. Each transfer implies collapse, selection, and renewal. A civilization rises around one sacred centre. Its fields are measured, its canals are cut, its temples receive offerings, its scribes remember names. Then authority departs, and another city takes up the burden. This is not yet history as a straight road. It is history as a revolving lamp. The first civilization before ours, in this reconstruction, may not be a nation with borders. It may be the age of first descent, the age when human groups imagined order entering the world through sacred settlement. The list gives you not proof of an empire, but a pattern of remembered foundations. Cities come forward like witnesses, each claiming to have held the first flame. The second possibility is stranger. Perhaps these reigns were designed to make time feel deep, almost inhumanly deep. By stretching kingship backward, the scribes placed their own rulers inside an ocean of inherited authority. A king of Ur or Isin could look at the list and see himself not as an accident, but as the latest bearer of something descending from beyond memory. That is politically useful. It is also spiritually unsettling. You hear a soft wind against the archive wall. Dust moves near the threshold. Someone outside pours water into a jar. The sound is simple and earthly, almost tender. It reminds you that every vast system must pass through ordinary hands. Even sacred kingship, said to descend from heaven, had to be written by a tired scribe who probably wanted supper. The King List asks you to hold two truths at once. First, it is not a straightforward record of 8 literal lost civilizations. Second, it does preserve an ancient belief that the known world was preceded by older orders, older rulers, and a fracture so great that time itself seemed divided. That is enough to make the clay feel heavy. You look again at the floodline. Before it, rains stretch into sacred vastness. After it, time becomes more human, though still grand. The break is not merely watery, it is mental. It separates one kind of memory from another. Before the flood, names are wrapped in impossibility. After the flood, kings begin to walk closer to the ground. The list does not solve the mystery. It deepens it. It suggests that the Sumerians saw civilization as something inherited through cycles of loss and return. A city holds order, then loses it. Another rises. The pattern repeats. Perhaps 8 civilizations are hidden inside that movement, not as separate continents of legend, but as 8 remembered thresholds in the long shaping of human order. You stand there until the signs blur slightly in the dim light. The tablet is silent, yet it has altered the air. It has made the past feel older than history, older than dynasties, older than the safe little fences of dates. And somewhere beyond the first kings, in a time no longer remembered, the earlier world waits without a name. The first forgotten city rises in your mind from brown water and patient mud. It does not rise quickly. Nothing truly ancient ever does. It gathers itself from reed huts, packed floors, fish bones, clay hearths, woven mats, and the dull shine of wet fields beneath a white morning sky. Before there are proud walls or royal inscriptions, there is a settlement learning how to remain. You stand at the edge of a river channel where the banks are soft. The water moves with a slow, thick sound, carrying silt from distant lands. Men push narrow boats through the reeds. Women spread grain on mats to dry. Children crouch near the shallows, watching frogs vanish between green stems. Smoke rises from cooking fires, faint and blue, then disappears into the heat. This imagined river-born civilization has no bronze gates, no carved palace front, no army standard snapping in the wind. Its power is humbler and perhaps older. It learns the moods of water. It knows when the river swells, when fish gather, when reeds can be cut without ruining the marsh. It builds with mud because mud is everywhere, and because mud forgives mistakes. Stone is proud. Mud is practical. Records from early southern Mesopotamia confirm that communities grew through long relationships with irrigation, marsh ecology, farming, herding, and trade. Archaeologists working with major research traditions at Chicago, Cambridge, and Pennsylvania have shown that the first cities did not appear from emptiness. They developed from earlier villages and ceremonial centres, with roots stretching through many centuries of experiment. Civilization, annoyingly enough for anyone who likes simple origin stories, takes practice. You feel the practice in every movement around you. A basket is lined with bitumen so it will not leak. A canal bank is repaired after a night of pressure. A field is divided with care. Because one careless line can start a feud that lasts longer than the original problem. Someone counts jars. Someone else forgets a jar. Human nature has already arrived, wearing a reed belt. The first civilization before ours, as a symbolic reconstruction, belongs to water. It is not an empire of conquest, but an age of settlement. People learn that survival can be organized, repeated, improved, and inherited. They pass down ways of reading clouds, mud, fish, reeds, and the tired behaviour of oxen. Their knowledge is not written yet, but it is stored in bodies, gestures, songs, and scars. A strange beauty rests in that unwritten memory. Nobody carves a royal title into stone. Nobody announces a golden age. Yet the world changes. A hut becomes a cluster becomes a village becomes a place with obligations. The dead are buried near the living. The same hearth is repaired. The same path is walked until it becomes a road. You breathe in the scent of marsh plants and warm clay. A fish dries on a frame beside a doorway. Date palms lift their crowns beyond the reeds. Dogs sleep in the shade with the confidence of creatures who have already conquered the household. In the distance, a storm gathers faintly, not yet dangerous, but noticed by everyone. The Sumerian tablets do not give you a neat account of this first water age. They do something more elusive. They remember cities as recipients of cosmic order, yet behind those cities must have lived generations who prepared the ground. The official story begins when kingship descends, but life had been gathering long before a king could claim it. This is one of history's quiet jokes. Authority usually arrives late and acts as though it invented the room. A mainstream fact helps steady the dream. Excavations in Mesopotamia have revealed deep occupational layers beneath later urban levels, showing gradual transitions from village life into increasingly complex societies. Research published through respected archaeological institutions has emphasized the importance of irrigation, craft specialization, and exchange networks in that process. The city is not a sudden miracle. It is a long conversation between landscape and labor, yet the fringe tidbit slips in softly, because ancient landscapes invite speculation. Some writers have suggested that memories of marsh settlements preserved traces of a lost amphibious wisdom, a people who lived almost between land and water. They point to later myths of beings associated with the sea or deep waters, teaching arts to humankind. Scholars treat such ideas cautiously, and usually as mythology rather than evidence. Still, marshes do create strange people in the best possible way. Anyone who lives where land keeps changing learns flexibility that a palace official may never understand. The open scholarly debate is subtler and more useful. Researchers continue discussing how much environmental change shaped early urban growth in southern Mesopotamia. Was irrigation the main engine of complexity, forcing cooperation and hierarchy? Did temple institutions coordinate labor before kings became dominant? Did trade with surrounding regions accelerate development? The answers remain contested, and the disagreements matter because they decide how we understand the first steps towards civilization. You watch workers open a small channel into a field, water slides forward, shining in the sun, then spreads across cracked earth. The change is immediate. Dust darkens. Seeds wait unseen. A child laughs because the water reaches his toes. The moment is tiny, yet it contains a revolution. Control water, and you begin to control hunger. Control hunger, and you begin to control people. Control people, and someone will eventually invent a title impressive enough to justify it. But here, in the first water age, control is still fragile. Floods do not respect titles. Mosquitoes do not care about sacred authority. A bad season can turn confidence into prayer. The people live with uncertainty so constant that it becomes part of their wisdom. They do not master nature. They negotiate with it. Poorly some years, brilliantly in others. Perhaps this is why later tradition placed beginnings near ancient cities of the south. Eridu, with its deep sacred layers, feels like a memory of settlement becoming sanctified. A practical place becomes a holy place because generations keep returning. The first reed shrine may not have looked impressive, but repetition gives weight. A small platform repaired for centuries becomes a cosmic center. In this way, the first forgotten civilization is not forgotten because it was unimportant. It is forgotten because it came before writing could praise it. It left behind post holes, pottery, seeds, animal bones, and changes in soil. It did not leave a king explaining how magnificent he was, which is refreshing. Archaeology must listen to its quieter remains. You stand in evening light as the river turns copper. The settlement lowers its voice. People bring animals closer. Fires brighten. The air fills with the smell of fish, smoke, damp earth, and crushed reeds. Somewhere, an elder tells a story about an earlier flood, a deeper channel, a time when the water came at night and took half the village. The children listen. because stories are also tools. They teach where not to build, they teach when to flee. They teach that the world has layers of danger beneath its calm surface. Long before tablets, memory travels through voices beside fire. And so the first civilization before ours may be heard as a murmur of water people, not lost in one grand disaster, but slowly covered by the success of those who came later. Their descendants built higher, counted more, wrote more, ruled more, and remembered less. Still, beneath the clay tablets and king lists, beneath the solemn claim that kingship descended from heaven, you can sense them near the riverbank. They are bending over canals in the heat. They are shaping mud into walls. They are learning how a place becomes home. The second age rises away from the marsh, toward harder ground and older stone. Your feet leave the sucking mud of the riverbank and climb into a landscape where the air grows thinner, drier, and sharper. The horizon is no longer flat. It breaks into ridges, pale hills, and distant mountains, their edges softened by heat and dust. Here the world feels less forgiving. Water is not everywhere. Shade must be found. Paths twist through rough country where goats move with insulting elegance, as if the gods gave them private maps. A person walking here learns caution. Loose stones slide under the heel. Wind carries grit into the eyes. The sun rests on the shoulders like a quiet burden. This imagined second civilization belongs to builders and foundations. It is not the water age of reeds and canals, but an age of weight. People learn to shape stone, raise platforms, mark sacred ground, and make certain places feel permanent. Their work may be smaller than later temples, but the intention is immense. They choose a place and tell the earth, "Here we will return." Records from archaeology confirm that long before the mature cities of Sumer, communities across the wider region built ritual spaces, storage structures, houses, and monumental enclosures. Excavations in northern Mesopotamia and nearby highland zones have shown that settled life developed in many forms, not only along the southern floodplains. Scholars associated with Stanford, Harvard, and British research teams have examined how early communities used architecture to organize memory, identity, and labor. You stand before a low stone foundation, half buried in dust. It might have supported a shrine, a communal building, or a structure whose purpose has slipped away. The stones are not perfectly cut. They are selected, carried, fitted, and made to endure. Each one holds the ache of a human back. Each one says that belief can become heavy. The scent here is different from the marsh. There is dry grass, sun-warmed limestone, animal hide, and the faint bitterness of smoke from dung fuel. A woman turns grinding stone in steady circles. A man repairs a wall with mud plaster. Children gather chips of flint near a shaded doorway. Somewhere, a dog barks at nothing important, continuing a proud tradition. The second civilization before ours, as a hidden threshold, may be imagined as the age when sacred permanence enters human life. The people do not simply live in a place. They bind themselves to it. They build in ways that outlast a season. They create spaces where ancestors, gods, and community memory can gather. The stone does not merely support a roof. It supports agreement. A mainstream fact gives this vision its ground. Archaeological research in the ancient Near East shows that communal construction often appeared before full urban civilization. Sites with ritual architecture suggest that belief, gathering, and shared labour helped shape social complexity. The old assumption that farming automatically produced temples has grown more complicated. Sometimes the sacred centre may have helped summon the settled world around it. This is where scholarly debate becomes especially interesting. Some researchers argue that practical needs, such as storage and defence, drove early construction. Others suggest that ritual gathering encouraged people to cooperate at larger scales before kings and bureaucrats existed. A more cautious group sees both forces working together, mixed with climate, resources, and local tradition. the discussion remains unsettled, which is rather fitting for stones that refuse to explain themselves. You touch the rough surface of a foundation block in your imagination. It is warm on top, cool in the shaded cracks. Dust has collected where fingers once may have rested. The stone seems silent, but not empty. It has absorbed footsteps, chants, arguments, animals brushing past, and the slow pressure of centuries. A quirky fringe tidbit appears among the rocks. Some enthusiasts claim that all ancient stone foundations point to a single vanished master civilization teaching architecture across the world. The idea has dramatic charm, especially when moonlight improves it. Professional archaeologists usually prefer local development, shared human problem-solving, and regional exchange. After all, when gravity exists everywhere, people everywhere eventually learn that walls stand better when their bases are solid. Still, the fringe fascination reveals a quieter truth. Stone feels older than explanation. When people find foundations without written labels, imagination moves in to furnish the rooms. It places lost priests, forgotten kings, star maps, hidden vaults, and solemn ceremonies into every gap. The past does not resist. It lets the mind wander, while archaeology patiently asks for evidence. In the Second Age, you see people learning the emotional power of elevation. A platform raises a shrine above the ground. A wall separates inside from outside. A threshold teaches the body to pause before entering. These gestures seem simple, but they change human experience. Space becomes meaningful. Direction matters. A central court, a raised floor, a marked doorway, all begin telling people how to move and what to feel. You hear sandals scrape on stone. A clay bowl is placed on a ledge. Smoke rises from herbs thrown into a small fire. The scent is sharp and green at first, then softens into ash. Nobody gives a sermon in the modern sense. Nobody needs to. The arrangement itself speaks. The stones, the fire, the gathering bodies, the shared silence, all create authority without writing a single word. This kind of authority may lie beneath later Sumerian temples. The great temple platforms of southern cities did not emerge from a spiritual vacuum. They belong to a longer human habit of raising sacred space and making the invisible feel located. In Sumer, temples became economic and religious centres, filled with offerings, personnel, storerooms, and ceremonies. But before such complexity, there was the simpler act of setting one stone upon another and saying, "This matters." You can feel how this age might be remembered only indirectly. Later scribes wrote of cities where kingship rested. They did not preserve the names of every builder whose hand shaped earlier foundations. Those builders vanished into function. Their work survived as layers beneath grander walls, as shapes repeated without credit, as the deep grammar of sacred architecture. The hidden timeline gains another layer here. First, the river teaches settlement, then stone teaches permanence. Water gathers people into dependence. Foundations gather them into memory. One age learns how to remain alive. Another learns how to remain present after death. That difference is profound. A civilization of foundations does not need to cover a continent. It can exist as a network of sacred building traditions, quarry knowledge, ritual gathering, and architectural memory. It may be many communities rather than one people. It may be remembered later not as a nation, but as the ancient habit of building upward from the earth toward powers no one can see. The sun lowers behind the hills. Shadows stretch across the stones and fill the spaces between them. In that blue-grey light, the foundation seems larger than it did at noon. The unfinished, broken, low remains begin to feel like the base of something enormous. Perhaps this is only the evening playing tricks. Evening has always been a generous accomplice to mystery. You sit beside the stones as the air cools. A distant bell from an animal's neck gives a dull note. Then another. Smoke trails from a settlement below. The people there do not know they belong to a forgotten age. They are simply repairing walls, feeding children, honouring the dead, and making tomorrow slightly less uncertain than today. That may be the deepest civilization of all. Not monuments first, but continuity. Not glory first, but return. The second age of stone leaves you with a calmer, heavier thought. Long before recorded history, human beings were already turning places into promises. They were learning that a built thing could hold fear, gratitude, power, and memory. They were learning to make the ground speak, and in those silent foundations, beneath later temples and older than the proudest royal name, another forgotten civilization rests with its face turned toward the mountains. In your ears, the echo changes into water moving through darkness. Not the broad, useful water of canals, and not the glittering marsh water under daylight. This is deeper water, remembered with unease. It gathers under floors, behind dreams. Inside old stories told when the lamps are low and children have stopped pretending not to listen. The third people belong to the floodplain, but not to comfort. Their world is built beside abundance and danger at once. They live where rivers spread into fields, then rise without kindness. They measure seasons by mud lines on walls. They speak of years when the water came gently, and years when it arrived like a hand sweeping a table clean. You stand near a settlement on a low rise. Around it, the plain stretches outward in green and brown bands. Irrigated fields shimmer in the heat. Date palms cluster beside channels. Huts and storehouses press close together, as if the houses themselves are nervous. Beyond them, the river glides with a polished surface that gives nothing away. The people watch it anyway. Records confirm that ancient Mesopotamian communities lived with recurring flood risk, shifting river courses, and changing environments. Archaeological studies from respected universities, including research traditions at Yale and Cambridge, have examined how flood deposits, settlement patterns, and irrigation systems shaped life across the alluvial plain. The rivers made farming possible, but they also threatened the very villages that depended on them. This is the tension that forms the third forgotten civilization. It is an age of water knowledge, but not merely the calm skill of using water. It is the darker wisdom of surviving water. These people know where to build a raised platform. They know which animals must be moved first. They know how grain smells when dampness begins to ruin it. They know the silence before panic. You feel that silence now. The air is too still. Birds lift suddenly from the reeds. A child points toward a line of floating debris far beyond the field. Adults stop speaking. It is only a small sign. Perhaps nothing. Yet in a floodplain, perhaps nothing is never quite nothing. A woman ties storage jars higher on a wooden frame. A man checks the tether of a boat. Someone carries a sleeping child toward a mound. No one shouts yet. Shouting wastes breath. The old ones have seen the river change its mind before. Their faces hold that particular calm that is not peace, but practiced fear. A mainstream fact steadies the scene. Flood stories appear in several Mesopotamian traditions, including Sumerian and later Akkadian versions. Scholars at Oxford and the University of Pennsylvania have studied these traditions as literature, theology, and possible cultural memory shaped by real environmental experience. They do not need to represent one single global event to be meaningful. They can preserve many generations of disaster folded into one vast story. This is how memory works when trauma repeats. One flood becomes every flood. One destroyed settlement becomes the world. One survivor becomes the ancestor of all who still breathe. The story grows because fear needs a shape large enough to hold it. The third people of water then may represent the civilization of survival narratives. They are not remembered clearly through names, walls, or kings. They survive as a pattern inside flood tradition. Their knowledge is practical, emotional, and sacred. They learn that civilization is fragile because water can erase the careful lines humans draw across Earth. A quirky fringe tidbit floats through the subject like a reed basket. Some modern writers claim that the Mesopotamian flood stories preserve memories of a sunken prehistoric supercivilization, washed away by a single immense catastrophe. Academic scholars remain cautious, usually pointing instead to regional floods, literary borrowing, and theological meaning. Still, the idea refuses to die, perhaps because every flood story feels larger than the water that first inspired it. You can understand why. A flood does not only destroy houses, it confuses reality. The road disappears, field boundaries vanish, graves dissolve into mud. A person may look across familiar land and find only a shining plain where home used to be. In that moment, the world has ended, even if another valley remains untouched. The scholarly debate continues in careful tones. Some researchers ask whether Sumerian flood tradition reflects memories of severe local flooding in southern Mesopotamia. Others focus on how scribes used flood stories to divide mythic time from human history. Another group studies the stories as part of wider ancient Near Eastern literature, where themes of divine anger, human noise, and chosen survivors are reshaped across cultures. The disagreement is not a weakness. It is the work of listening to damaged evidence. You walk through the settlement as preparations deepen. Grain sacks are lifted. Clay tablets are wrapped in cloth, because even ancient administrators feared paperwork loss with admirable seriousness. A goat resists rescue with the dignity of a creature committed to poor decisions. The river, meanwhile, rises by a finger's width, then another. Rain may be falling somewhere far upstream. Snowmelt may be swelling a tributary. A levee may be weakening beyond sight. The people here cannot see the whole system. They only see signs. That is often the human condition, is it not? You stand in one small place, reading hints from a world too large to explain itself. The scent changes first. Wet earth grows heavier. Rotten reeds stir under the pressure of moving water. The air cools slightly, carrying the metallic smell of disturbed mud. Then comes the sound, low and thick, not yet roaring, but full of force. It is water moving with intention, though water has no mind and needs none. The settlement contracts around its highest ground. People gather near a raised platform. Fires are covered, infants are held close. An elder begins speaking words that sound half like instruction and half like prayer. The words do not stop the flood. Perhaps they are not meant to. Perhaps they only hold the people together while the plain comes apart. Here, in the Third Age, civilization learns to become a story that can survive the loss of its own houses. If walls fall, memory must carry the map. If fields vanish, names must preserve belonging. If the dead are taken by water, ritual must return them to meaning. This is not lesser than architecture. It may be older and stronger. The Sumerian flood tradition carries such emotional weight. It imagines a time when destruction divides what came before from what can be remembered afterward. A great flood becomes the boundary between sacred antiquity and human history. Before it, kings reign for impossible spans. Beyond it, rulers become closer to mortal scale. The flood is not only an event, it is a wound in time. The third forgotten civilization lives inside that wound. You do not see its capital. You do not hear its official language. You see people lifting jars, binding boats, comforting children, and watching the river with eyes that have learned humility. Their genius is not domination, it is endurance. Night comes while the waters rise. The sky loses colour. Lamps appear on the mound like small stars fallen to earth. Around them, dark water spreads through fields, covering furrows, paths, and the low places where dogs once slept in the shade. The people listen to things bump against walls. A beam, a basket, a door from somewhere else. It is possible that later scribes inherited fragments from such nights. Not one night alone, but many. Their tablets transformed local terror into cosmic memory. They gave the flood a divine counsel, a chosen survivor, a boat, a warning, and a renewal. In doing so, they did not make the fear false, they made it bearable. You feel sleep pressing softly at the edge of the scene, but the water remains awake. It glints under moonlight. It carries reeds, insects, and broken pieces of human certainty. When morning comes, the survivors will count what remains. They will mourn. They will rebuild, perhaps in the same unsafe place, because fertile land is persuasive and humans are stubborn. The third people of water leave no clear monument except the old lesson. A civilization can rise because of a river and disappear because of that same river. The giver and destroyer may share one shining face, and in the slow darkness of the floodplain, beneath every later story of a world drowned and renewed, you sense them waiting, still listening for the waterline to climb. Your mind drifts upward from the dark floodplain into a sky so wide it feels almost watchful. The earth below is quiet, but the heavens are crowded. Stars gather in dense fields above the black line of palms. The moon rises with a pale edge, slow and deliberate, as if it has never hurried once in all the ages of the world. The fourth civilization belongs to those who watch the sky. They are not escaping the earth. They are trying to understand it by looking away from it. The river rises, crops fail, kings die, cities quarrel, and still the stars return with a discipline that human affairs rather noticeably lack. Up there, order appears untouched by dust, hunger, gossip, or tax collectors. You stand on a roof at night. The mud brick under your feet still holds a little warmth from the day. A woven mat lies near a low parapet. Someone has placed a bowl of water where the moonlight trembles on its surface. A scribe or priest watches the horizon, marking the first appearance of a star above the eastern rim. His eyes are patient. His neck probably hurts. Civilization has never been kind to specialists. Records confirm that Mesopotamian scholars became famous for observing the heavens, especially in later Babylonian traditions that inherited much from earlier southern culture. Modern historians of science at institutions such as Oxford, Brown, and Chicago have studied how omen texts, calendars, mathematical astronomy, and temple scholarship developed across Mesopotamia. The sky was not merely decorative, it was a field of signs, measured with increasing care. Yet the fourth age in this hidden reconstruction is older than full mathematical astronomy. It begins as tension. People notice that the moon changes shape, returns, vanishes, and returns again. They notice that certain stars appear before seasons shift. They learn that planting, harvesting, ritual timing, and travel can be tied to the sky. Above them, time becomes visible. You can feel how powerful that would be. In a world where rivers break banks and kings make alarming decisions, the repeated paths of lights above offer a different kind of confidence. Not safety, exactly. The heavens do not prevent suffering, but they give rhythm. They say that disorder below may still be held within a greater pattern. The fourth sky watchers may represent the civilization of calendars, omens, and cosmic alignment. Their cities are not defined only by walls and canals, but by horizons. A temple doorway may face a significant point of sunrise. A ritual may wait for the new moon. A ruler may ask whether the heavens approve his war, his building project, or his haircut. Because power has always been anxious. A mainstream fact anchors this idea. Ancient Mesopotamians developed sophisticated systems of celestial observation, and later cuneiform tablets preserve long traditions of lunar and planetary omens. Scholarly work from leading universities has shown that these practices were embedded in temple learning and royal decision-making. The line between science, religion, and politics was not drawn in the modern way. The sky spoke to all three at once. You hear a stylus tapping lightly against clay. The watcher records not poetry but observation. A crescent appears late. A planet glows red, an eclipse darkens the moon. To him, these are not random scenes. They are messages, or at least warnings. The universe has handwriting, and the trained eye must learn to read it. The air smells of cooling brick, lamp oil, and faint incense. A night insect bumps against a wall. Far below, a dog barks, then stops. The city sleeps in layers, but the roof remains awake. The watcher's assistant fights sleep with limited success. Even cosmic order can be a little boring at 3 a.m. A quirky fringe tidbit appears naturally under such a sky. Some modern writers claim that ancient star knowledge must have come from a vanished advanced civilization, because early people could not possibly have tracked the heavens so carefully. Professional historians usually smile thinly at that. Human beings, after all, had eyes, patience, fear, and thousands of nights without television. Those are excellent scientific instruments. Still, the fringe idea points toward a real wonder. The Sky Watchers created continuity across generations. One person observes a moonrise, another repeats it years later. A school preserves the method, a temple archive stores results. Knowledge becomes cumulative, not because anyone has a machine, but because memory is organized. That is civilization in its most delicate form. The open scholarly debate turns on origins and transmission. Researchers continue examining how early sky watching grew from practical seasonal observation into complex omen literature and later mathematical astronomy. Some emphasize temple institutions. Others stress royal needs, agricultural timing, or the inheritance of older folk traditions. The exact path remains uncertain, especially for the earlier stages, where evidence is thinner and silence has swallowed many records. You gaze toward the constellation patterns that ancient people arranged differently than you might expect. They did not inherit your modern star maps. They gave the sky meaning shaped by their own animals, gods, tools, and fears. A cluster might become a divine symbol. A planet might be associated with a deity. A darkened moon might tremble with political danger. The heavens were not empty space. They were populated order. This is where the fourth civilization becomes slightly unsettling. To watch the sky is to learn that human life is small, but also exposed. Every city lies beneath a dome of signs. Every birth, treaty, harvest, illness, and rebellion occurs under lights that seem to have been moving long before people learn to name them. The watcher does not feel alone. That may comfort him. It may also trouble him. For a moment, you imagine an older settlement where the first observers gather on a rise beyond the fields. No tablet lies beside them yet. No formal school exists. There is only a pattern noticed and remembered. The same star returns with the season of heat. The moon marks the time for a rite. A bright wandering light appears where it should not, and elders murmur. A system begins as a shared unease. The fourth civilization might not have ruled land. It may have ruled time. Its priests, elders, or watchers learn to tell others when to sow, when to wait, when to celebrate, when to fear. Such knowledge creates authority without a sword. If you can read the sky, people will gather near you. They may also blame you when rain fails, which is the less glamorous side of expertise. The Sumerian world later placed gods in relation to celestial bodies and cosmic order. Temples linked earth and heaven through ritual. Kingship itself, said to descend from above, gains deeper meaning under this sky. Authority comes downward because the heavens appear to hold the design that earth must imitate. The city becomes a small pattern beneath a larger pattern. You notice the watcher lower his head at last. Dawn has begun to loosen the eastern darkness. The stars fade not because they are gone, but because light has hidden them. That, too, becomes a lesson. Hidden things may still govern what is seen. A quiet thought, and not entirely comfortable. The roof cools under your feet. Birds begin in the reeds. Somewhere, Bakers open ovens and the first bread smell rises into morning. The city returns to earthly concerns. People argue about measures, animals, debts, and who borrowed a tool without asking. Above them, invisible in daylight, the sky remains exactly where it was. The fourth Sky Watchers leave behind a civilization of attention. Their gift is not a lost machine or a secret tower of crystal. It is the disciplined act of looking up, night after night, until wonder becomes knowledge and knowledge becomes power. They teach that time has rhythm, that fear can be charted, and that the heavens can make even a small roof feel like the edge of the infinite. And under that fading morning sky, you sense another forgotten age turning slowly overhead, silent, measured, and cold with stars. For a moment, the world softens into green shade. You're no longer standing under the hard command of stars or beside the uneasy strength of rising water. You enter a realm of orchards, garden walls, damp channels, and leaves moving gently in the morning air. The light here is filtered through date palms, fig branches, and hanging vines. It falls in broken pieces over the ground, as if the sun itself has learned manners. The fifth civilization belongs to the garden, not a gardener's decoration, not a little pleasure patch beside a palace, but a living system of water, grain, trees, animals, pathways, scent, and human care. This age imagines order as cultivation. It does not merely survive the land, it tends it, persuades it, trims it, waters it, and asks it politely to become generous. You walk beside a narrow canal, its sides strengthened with packed clay. Water slips along with a soft whisper, touching the roots of young trees. The air smells of damp earth, dates, crushed herbs, and the faint sourness of fermenting fruit. Bees move in and out of blossoms. Birds make quick decisions in the branches. Somewhere nearby, a goat is chewing something it absolutely should not be chewing. Records confirm that ancient Mesopotamian life depended deeply on managed agriculture, irrigation, orchards, and grain production. Researchers at universities such as Yale, Oxford, and Chicago have studied how fields, canals, temple estates, and storage systems shape society in southern Mesopotamia. Barley, dates, sheep, reeds, and garden produce were not background details. They were the substance of power, ritual, diet, labour, and survival. Yet the Garden Age is not only economic, it is emotional. A cultivated landscape changes how people imagine the world. A field can be measured, taxed, inherited, and fought over. An orchard is slower and more intimate. Trees take years to mature. They ask for patience beyond one season. To plant a tree is to believe that someone will be here later. That belief is powerful. You pause under a date palm and watch a worker climb with a looped rope around his body. His hands are rough. His feet press carefully against the trunk. Below him, baskets wait in shade. A woman checks irrigation cuts with a wooden tool, opening one small channel and closing another. Her movements are precise, almost musical. The garden survives because someone notices details. A mainstream fact steadies the leaves around you. In Mesopotamia, irrigation agriculture supported dense populations and urban institutions, but it also created risks, including salinization of soils in certain areas. Studies in environmental archaeology have examined how long-term farming decisions affected productivity and settlement patterns. A garden can be paradise, but only while care continues. Neglect it, and paradise becomes an accounting problem with insects. The fifth civilization before ours, in this symbolic reconstruction, is the age of cultivated abundance. It is remembered in stories of sacred gardens, fertile enclosures, divine planting, and ideal places where water flows correctly. Such stories do not need to describe one literal lost orchard. They may preserve a human longing for the moment when nature and labour seemed beautifully balanced. You can see why ancient people would dream this way. Outside the garden wall, the world is uncertain. Flood, drought, disease, invasion, and hunger wait with patient faces. Inside the wall, at least for a while, water moves where it is guided. Trees give shade. Grain fills jars. Herbs perfume the air. Bees do their small golden work. It feels like an answer. The Sumerian imagination often placed divine life close to fertility, fresh water, growth, and ordered abundance. The gods did not live in empty abstraction. They received offerings of bread, beer, oil, animals, fruit, and cloth. Their temples functioned within the same agricultural world that fed human bodies. Sacred life and farming life were braided together like reed rope. A quirky fringe tidbit grows naturally in this shade. Some modern seekers connect Sumerian garden motifs with legends of a lost perfect homeland, suggesting that all paradise stories descend from one ancient memory of a real enclosed sanctuary. Scholars are more restrained, noting that gardens appear in many cultures because food, shade, water, and safety are universally attractive. Honestly, humanity did not need a secret master key to appreciate snacks under a tree. Still, the idea lingers because paradise memories feel strangely specific. A watered place, a protected place, a place where humans live close to divine intention until something changes. Garden stories often carry the sadness of lost access. The gate closes, the land dries, the balance breaks. The human figure steps out from shade into labour. The scholarly debate remains open around how ancient garden imagery developed across Mesopotamian, Levantine, and wider Near Eastern traditions. Some researchers emphasise actual royal and temple gardens with their irrigation and symbolic power. Others examine mythic landscapes where fertility expresses divine favour. Another perspective studies gardens as political statements, showing that rulers could command water, plants, labour, and distance. Each view adds a different path through the trees. You move deeper into the orchard. The ground is cool beneath your feet. Moisture darkens the soil around the roots. A clay jar hangs from a branch, perhaps holding water or beer for workers. The shade has a low sound, made of leaves rubbing together, insects moving unseen, and water striking small stones in the channel. It is almost enough to make the mind sleep. But the garden has a hidden edge. Cultivation creates dependence. Once people rely on canals and fields, they must protect them. They need managers, labourers, repair crews, guards, schedules, measurements, and punishments. Abundance attracts administration as surely as fruit attracts flies. A peaceful orchard may feed a temple bureaucracy large enough to make a modern office worker feel seen. This is the unsettling part of the fifth civilization. The garden seems gentle, but it teaches control. Water must be allocated, trees must be owned, harvests must be stored, workers must be counted. The dream of abundance becomes the structure of obligation. Somewhere, a scribe records dates, baskets, labour days, and deliveries. The smell of ripe fruit mingles with the dry seriousness of accounting. Perhaps that is why garden memories are never entirely innocent. They contain beauty, but also exclusion. Someone tends the trees, someone receives the fruit, someone guards the gate, someone stands outside it. The earliest dreams of paradise may already carry a question about power. Who lives in the watered place, and who must dig the channel? You look toward a small shrine near the garden's edge. It is made of mud brick, whitewashed, with a simple offering stand. A bowl of grain rests there, along with a cluster of dates and a small cup of beer. The offering is modest, but full of meaning. The people return a portion of abundance to the powers they believe made abundance possible. Gratitude becomes ritual. Ritual becomes rhythm. In this age, humanity's role appears as caretaker and servant at once. People coax life from the soil, but they also become bound to the systems they create. The garden gives food, shade, sweetness, and settlement. It also demands labour that never truly ends. Canals silt up, trees age, walls crack, coats plot. There is always another task. Evening settles gently over the cultivated realm. The leaves turn black against a copper sky. Water cools in the channels. Workers carry baskets home, their shoulders bent but not defeated. Children gather fallen dates from the dust. Smoke rises beyond the wall, carrying the scent of flatbread and onions into the blue air. The fifth garden realm does not vanish in flames or flood. It fades into every later dream of ordered life. It becomes the memory of a place where water obeyed, trees answered, and humans stood close to the fragile promise of a snuff. And perhaps, somewhere beneath the oldest stories of paradise, there remains the quiet sound of a canal moving through roots, carrying moonlight into the soil. A hush settles over the plain, not the peaceful hush of sleep, but the stranger silence of something missing. You walk through a place where history has thinned. The wind moves across broken ground. It passes over low mounds, scattered pottery, collapsed walls, and rooms whose names have not survived. Nothing announces itself. No king steps forward. No tablet gives a proud explanation. The sixth civilization belongs to absence. This is not an easy age to enter, because the mind wants solid things. It wants city gates, king lists, burial chambers, temples, seals, weapons, songs, and inscriptions. It wants the past to behave like a well-organized museum display, with labels placed politely beside every mystery. But ancient time is rarely so considerate. Much of it has been scraped, burned, washed away, reused, mistranslated, mislaid, or simply never written down. You stand in a deserted settlement at noon. The light is harsh, and the ground reflects it upward. A few walls remain, not high enough to impress anyone, but high enough to cast thin shadows. A clay floor lies cracked like dry skin. Near a doorway, an old hearth appears as a dark stain. No one can tell you whose hands once fed that fire. Records confirm that archaeology often works through gaps as much as discoveries. Major research programs at the University of Chicago, Harvard, Oxford, and other institutions have shown that ancient Mesopotamian settlement patterns include occupied sites, abandoned zones, damaged layers, and periods where evidence becomes difficult to interpret. The missing record is not empty. It is a damaged archive made of soil, chance, and survival. The sixth empire of silence is imagined from those gaps. It may not be an empire in the political sense. It is an empire of erased people, vanished settlements, unrecorded labour, and traditions that passed without leaving names. Their reach is measured not by conquered land, but by how often archaeology encounters a trace, then loses the thread. You bend near a broken jar half exposed in dust. Its rim is simple, its body is plain. It may have held grain, water, oil, or beer. It may have belonged to someone careful, careless, generous, difficult, tired, or beloved. You will never know. The jar offers material proof of life, but almost no biography. It is both evidence and refusal. That refusal shapes the mood of this age. Silence is not the absence of humanity. It is humanity without explanation. It asks you to respect lives that cannot be made dramatic for your convenience. A vanished household does not become less real because no royal scribe celebrated it. A nameless worker didn't vanish politely so later scholars could keep their timelines tidy. The smell here is dry clay, brittle weeds, and old plaster warmed by the sun. A lizard darts through a wall crack with the confidence of a current resident. Bits of straw still show inside mudbrick, pale and fragile. You touch nothing, but you imagine the texture, crumbling, powdery, almost soft. The wall is returning to earth grain by grain. A mainstream fact stands with quiet importance. Many people in ancient Mesopotamia were never named in literary texts, yet their labour sustained temples, fields, canals, households, and workshops. Administrative tablets sometimes record workers as numbers, categories, or ration recipients rather than full persons. Social historians have used these records to reconstruct parts of ordinary life, but the emotional worlds of most people remain largely unreachable. This is where the Sixth Age deepens. A civilization can be loud in its institutions while silent in its people. Temples may archive grain, palaces may boast of victories, kings may send their names into clay, yet the majority who build, carry, weave, grind, herd, cook, clean, mourn, and repair remain nearly invisible. Their lives create civilization, while civilization forgets their faces. A quirky fringe tidbit appears in this silence like a candle in a sealed room. Some modern writers claim that missing layers in the ancient record prove deliberate suppression by priesthoods, conquerors, or secret keepers. It is a tempting thought, because conspiracy gives silence a villain. Scholars usually answer more gently. Many gaps come from ordinary causes, such as erosion, later rebuilding, excavation limits, looting, decay, and the simple fact that most ancient people did not write literature about themselves. Still, the suspicion is understandable. When enough is missing, absence begins to feel intentional. A broken archive can look like a locked door. A ruined room can feel like someone removed the furniture before you arrived. The imagination does not like gaps. It fills them, and then starts charging rent. The open scholarly debate concerns how much can be reconstructed from fragmentary evidence. Some historians believe careful study of pottery, settlement size, diet, tools, and administrative records can reveal broad social patterns. Others warn that material remains may hide inequality, belief, trauma, migration, and identity in ways we cannot safely recover. The phrase remains cautiously unresolved, and it should. Humility is part of the method. You move through the settlement slowly. Here is a room with a raised platform. Here is a drain. Here is a patch of ash. Here is a doorway narrowed by later repairs. None of it gives a complete story, but each piece implies habits. People entered here. They slept there. They cooked near that stain. They repaired that wall instead of abandoning it immediately. Repair is one of the most intimate traces humans leave. The sixth civilization may be formed from repair. Not grand creation, but maintenance. The hidden people kept earlier systems alive without becoming famous. They dredged canals before sunrise. They patched roofs after storms. They replaced baskets, reset stones, copied worn tablets, and taught children where water jars belonged. They did the work that prevents collapse, which history often notices only once it fails. You hear the sound of a broom against a packed floor, soft, repetitive, almost ceremonial. Dust moves to the threshold. A woman stoops and clears it away. No inscription records this. No museum case highlights the broom stroke. Yet a clean floor changes the feeling of a house. The sacred and the ordinary are closer than the grand narratives admit. This empire of silence may also include cultures absorbed into Sumerian memory without retaining separate names. Migrants, neighbours, traders, captives, herders, marsh dwellers, highland workers, and speakers of languages not preserved in tablets may all have shaped the world that later texts present as ordered and familiar. Their influence survives in tools, crops, roots, customs, and perhaps words whose origins are debated. The plain grows quiet in the afternoon heat. Even insects seem to lower their voices. From the top of the mound, you can see other mounds in the distance, each one a covered question. Some have been excavated, some have not. Some may contain archives, others may contain only walls and dust. Each holds a version of human life that waited, worked, and disappeared. This is the unsettling tenderness of the Sixth Age. It teaches that lost civilizations are not always buried because they were mysterious or magnificent. Sometimes they are lost because they were normal. Normal life leaves traces too thin for certainty. A meal ends, a mat decays, a spoken name dies with the last person who remembers it. Then the centuries come, patient and unsentimental, yet silence does not mean nothing remains. A seed imprinting clay can reveal agriculture. A child's footprint in drying mud can cross 4,000 years with startling intimacy. A worn threshold can show where countless feet passed in and out. Small evidence gathers into a quiet chorus, and the chorus says, "They were here." As evening approaches, the abandoned walls turn amber. Shadows fill the rooms, making them look briefly inhabited. You can almost imagine someone returning with a water jar, annoyed to find strangers contemplating her broken kitchen. The thought is comforting. It returns dignity to the ruin. The sixth empire of silence does not ask for belief in hidden palaces beneath every mound. It asks for a deeper patience. It asks you to listen to missing names, to damaged layers, to ordinary gestures fossilized in soil. It asks you to understand that history is not only revealed by what speaks, it is also shaped by what cannot speak anymore. And in that wordless empire under dust and hard sunlight, an entire forgotten civilization continues to exist as a pause in the record, waiting for someone to notice the silence. The air grows warmer before you see the fire. It touches your face first, a dry breath moving from some hidden chamber ahead. Then comes the smell, sharp and earthy, made of charcoal, heated clay, singed reeds, and something metallic beneath it all. You follow the glow through dusk until the settlement appears around a cluster of furnaces and kilns. The seventh age belongs to fire, not wildfire leaping through grass, and not the gentle cooking flame beside a household wall. This is trained fire, enclosed fire, watched fire, the kind that must be fed and feared at the same time. It sits inside pits and domes, inside clay-lined chambers and stone-ringed hearths, turning soft things hard, dull things bright, and ordinary earth into objects that can outlive their makers. You stand beside a potter's kiln as night gathers. The outer clay is dark, cracked, and warm enough to make the skin tighten. Inside, vessels are changing in colour and strength. Bowls that entered as damp shapes will emerge as hardened containers. Fragile human intention will become usable form. It is a modest miracle, though the potter would probably prefer you not say that while he is trying to keep the temperature steady. Records confirm that pottery gains us kiln technology, and later metallurgy transformed ancient societies across the Near East. Archaeologists from institutions such as Harvard, Chicago, and Pennsylvania have studied how craft specialization changed settlement life. Exchange, storage, cooking, ritual, and social identity. Fire was not simply a tool, it was a turning point in the relationship between human hands and the material world. The seventh civilization before ours, as a hidden threshold, is the fireborn age of craft. Its people discover that earth can be persuaded to become something else. Clay becomes jars, bricks, tablets, figurines, and ceilings. Stone becomes tools through striking and grinding. Minerals become pigments. Later, ores surrender metal under heat, air, and skill. The world is no longer only gathered, it is transformed. You hear the rhythm of work around you. A woman smooths a jar with a damp hand. A boy turns a lump of clay, copying an older worker and pretending he is not copying. A man crouches near a furnace, watching the colour of heat with an attention that seems almost priestly. Sparks lift into the dark, brief and orange, then vanish before they can become stars. The scent thickens. Smoke from charcoal clings to hair and cloth. Damp clay smells like rain that has not fallen. A crucible cools near a wall, its surface dark and blistered. Nearby, Finished pots are stacked in careful rows, some plain, some painted, some warped by heat into shapes nobody requested. Even ancient quality control had its emotional challenges. A mainstream fact gives this fire its foundation. By the 4th and 3rd millennia before the Common Era, Mesopotamian societies used specialized crafts, including ceramics, textile production, stoneworking, and metalworking, within growing urban economies. Scholarly research in scientific journals has shown that craft production often connected households, temples, traders, and regional exchange networks. Objects moved, techniques spread, and skilled hands became valuable. This age is dangerous because craft creates both beauty and hierarchy. A fine vessel can hold oil for a god, beer for a feast, or grain for a ration. A seal can mark ownership. A metal blade can cut reeds, harvest crops, or harm a neighbour. A fired tablet can preserve law, debt, praise, complaint, and memory. Fire strengthens objects, but it can also strengthen control. You step toward a workshop where lamps flicker against walls blackened by smoke. Tools lie on a mat, bone, flint, copper, cord, shell, and shaped clay rest together like a vocabulary of matter. Nothing here is random. Each object knows its purpose. Each purpose belongs to a chain of knowledge stretching through teachers, families, apprentices, traders, and mistakes too embarrassing to record. The quirky fringe tidbit glows in the coals. Some modern enthusiasts argue that early metallurgy must have been taught by beings from beyond the known world, because the process seems too strange to discover. Scholars usually answer that experimentation, accident, observation, and long practice explain much more. People notice colours in stones, strange effects in fires, and new possibilities in heated minerals. Human curiosity is fully capable of getting itself into complicated trouble. Still, fire knowledge does feel uncanny. You take dull rock, crush it, heat it, add fuel, manage air, and suddenly a new substance appears. To someone watching for the first time, metal might seem born rather than made. It shines like water but resists the hand. It bends, hardens, cuts, rings, and reflects faces in a way stone never does. No wonder craft often brushes against magic in ancient imagination. The scholarly debate remains open around how technologies moved through early Mesopotamia and neighbouring regions. Some researchers emphasise local innovation within workshops. Others trace wider exchange routes linking Anatolia, Iran, the Gulf, and the Levant. Another group examines the role of elites, who may have demanded prestige goods and supported specialised production. The evidence is rich, but uneven, and each object carries more than one possible journey. You watch a potter remove cooled vessels from the kiln. He taps one with a fingernail and listens. A good vessel answers with a clean sound. A cracked one gives itself away. This little act is wonderfully human. The ear judges what the eye may miss. Knowledge lives not only in the mind, but in touch, sound, and patience. The fire-born age also gives humanity a new relation to time. A raw clay mark can be erased. A fired tablet can endure. A sun-dried brick can melt back into mud. A baked brick can stand through seasons. A meal vanishes. A pot remains. Fire allows memory to harden. It lets a civilization leave behind more than bones and stones. Yet every gain carries a shadow. Kilns require fuel. Metalworking requires resources. Craft specialization requires people who can spend time making things others will use. This means surplus, organization, exchange, and often inequality. Someone gathers wood, someone mines ore, someone hauls clay, someone owns the finished goods. The beauty of an object may hide many tired backs behind it. You move through the workshop lanes as darkness deepens. The settlement glows from within, not like a palace, but like a field of small controlled suns. Each kiln is a promise that heat can be mastered for a while. Each flame is watched because mastery is temporary. Turn away too long, and the vessel fails. Feed it badly, and the furnace sulks like a minor god. The seventh civilization is remembered in the things it leaves: potsherds on a mound, slag near a furnace, burned brick in a wall, beads drilled with astonishing patience, cylinder seals carved so finely that their tiny scenes still seem alive when rolled across clay. These objects do not speak in sentences, yet they reveal a world where skill became inheritance. You imagine a craftmaster placing a finished seal into a young apprentice's palm. The object is cool now, though fire helped make its world possible. On its surface, a scene is cut in miniature. Figures approach a seated power. Animals twist in formal balance. The apprentice turns it slowly, understanding that a tool can also carry authority. This is the unsettling gift of the Fireborn Age. It teaches that humans are not merely creatures within the world. They are makers of altered worlds. They take clay from riverbanks, fuel from scrubland, ore from hills, and breath from their own lungs. They combine them until matter obeys a new purpose. The night grows quiet except for the furnaces. Their glow pulses on walls, faces, and low roofs. Above them, stars remain cold and distant. But here below, humans have made smaller stars that can be touched, tended, and feared. Sparks drift upward, fading into darkness before they reach the sky, and in the red light of those kilns, long before the known Bronze Age fully names itself, you sense a forgotten civilization of makers, half practical and half sacred, shaping the future from earth, heat, and breath. The ground beneath you feels strangely crowded now, as if every footstep presses against another buried room. You're closer to the known world, closer to the first cities that can be named with confidence. Yet the closeness makes the mystery sharper. The eighth civilization is not far away in some shining lost continent. It is beneath the threshold. It is almost under the floor. This final forgotten society belongs to the people nearest to Sumer, the ones whose shadows fall across the first clear lines of written memory. They are not fully visible, yet they are not entirely gone. They survive in borrowed customs, unexplained words, inherited shrine sites, old craft habits, sacred names, and the uneasy feeling that the earliest tablets are beginning a story already in motion. You stand beside a mound at dawn. The wind is cool for a little while, and the light spreads slowly over the plain. Broken bricks lie in low ridges. A few pottery fragments catch the sun. Beneath the mound are older floors, older hearths, older graves, older pathways, all compressed into the patient darkness of soil. The place looks empty, but emptiness can be very deceptive. Records confirm that southern Mesopotamia contained long sequences of settlement before the earliest historical dynasties. Archaeologists working through major research traditions at Chicago, Pennsylvania, and Oxford have studied periods such as the Ubaid and Uruk, when villages, temples, trade networks, and administrative habits grew increasingly complex. These were not footnotes to civilization. They were the deep foundations upon which later Sumerian cities rose. The eighth civilization before ours, as a symbolic reconstruction, is the last pre-written order. It is the society that stands just behind the curtain of writing. Its people may not call themselves Sumerian in the way later texts do. Their language may be partly lost, their identities blurred, their borders uncertain. Yet their world prepares the stage so completely that when writing appears, it seems to record a system already old. This is the unsettling part. Writing does not create civilization out of silence. It catches civilization mid-breath. You imagine a settlement in this border age. It has storage rooms, communal labour, specialist craftsmen, ritual spaces, and exchange reaching beyond the horizon. Clay tokens may help count goods before full writing emerges. Seals impress authority into wet clay. Reeds are cut, fields watered, animals counted, and offerings brought to raise buildings that command the eye without needing to explain themselves. The air smells of straw, bitumen, wool, and morning smoke. A worker lifts a basket of mud brick. Another carries jars sealed with clay caps. A child watches adults make impressions on lumps of clay and understands only that marks have power. That child is correct, which is always dangerous. Once a mark can stand for obligation, memory is no longer private. A mainstream fact gives this threshold its weight. The Uruk period saw major developments in urbanization, administrative technology, long-distance exchange, and social differentiation across Mesopotamia. Scholars have used excavated buildings, ceilings, tablets, pottery, and settlement surveys to reconstruct this transformation. The emergence of writing was part of a wider administrative world, not an isolated invention by one clever person having a suspiciously productive afternoon. The 8th civilization is therefore not imagined as a single hidden empire. It is better understood as a pre-literate civilizational horizon, a network of practices that made later Sumer possible. It includes the builders of early temples, the keepers of stores, the makers of seals, the organizers of labor, and the nameless families who accepted new forms of authority because bread, water, and obligation had become tangled together. A quirky fringe tidbit appears here with quiet persistence. Some modern writers argue that the suddenness of Uruk's rise proves an outside teacher, perhaps survivors from a drowned civilization or strangers from the sky. Academic archaeologists usually reject the suddenness itself, pointing to long developmental sequences and regional complexity. Still, the feeling of abruptness is understandable. When writing finally appears, the past seems to snap into focus, like a lamp being lit in a crowded room, but the room was crowded already. You pass into an imagined storehouse where jars stand shoulder to shoulder. The floor is packed hard from many feet. Clay ceilings hang from cords or close containers. Each seal impression says that someone has authority over what passes through this space. The mark is small, but the change is immense. Trust is no longer only personal, it becomes institutional. That may be one of the 8th Age's true revolutions. People begin living inside systems too large for face-to-face memory. A household knows its own jars, a village knows its own fields, but a city requires records, supervisors, standardized measures, storage, distribution, and punishment for those who become creatively forgetful. The 8th civilization invents habits that make the city think. The open, scholarly debate concerns the nature of this transformation. Some researchers emphasize temple institutions as engines of organization and redistribution. Others focus on competing households, emerging elites, trade, craft specialization, and regional interaction. Some argue for southern innovation, while others stress influences moving through wider networks. The evidence remains complex, and the origin of urban life refuses to be reduced to one tidy cause. You hear that complexity in the settlement itself. Near a courtyard, wool is being worked. Elsewhere, clay is shaped into bowls. A group of men loads goods for travel. A woman checks a seal on a jar and frowns slightly, proving that administrative suspicion is also ancient. At a shrine, offerings are arranged. At a canal, workers argue over water. This is not mythic serenity. It is organized life, and organized life always produces friction. The 8th civilization may also carry inherited fear. Its people live with memories of flood, drought, failed harvests, abandoned sites, and perhaps migrations from lands no longer fertile. They understand that order must be maintained because disorder is never far away. Their rituals, buildings, and records may all express a desire to hold the world steady. You walk toward a raised platform where mud brick walls gleam pale in the morning. The building is not yet the towering form later ages will know, but it already lifts sacred space above ordinary ground. Steps lead upward, offerings move inward, goods move outward. People gather where power, food, and divine presence appear to meet. It is beautiful. It is also efficient, which is often where beauty starts making demands. This society stands nearest to humanity as history can see it. Its hands press the first administrative signs. Its trade routes carry goods and ideas. Its rituals shape later myths. Its settlements grow into cities that scribes will eventually name. Yet its own voice remains partial. It is the face just behind the mask, visible only through the eye holes. The eighth, forgotten civilization is buried beneath myth, clay, an inherited fear because it becomes absorbed into what follows. Once Sumerian texts begin speaking, earlier complexity is pulled into Sumerian identity, temple tradition, and royal ideology. The predecessor does not disappear by collapse alone. It disappears by becoming ancestry. That is a quieter form of burial. The dawn brightens. Workers begin their tasks. Smoke rises. Animals shift in pens. A seal is pressed into clay, lifted, and carried away as proof that something has been counted, owned, promised, or controlled. The mark is brief, but it changes the world. The Eighth Age is full of such marks, small acts that create large structures. You stand on the mound and feel how close this forgotten people are. They are not distant legends. They are the almost remembered. Their world leans against the earliest tablets. Their habits breathe through later cities. Their fear of chaos becomes law, ritual, storage, walls, and lists. And beneath the first written names, beneath the proud claim that civilization has begun, the Eighth Society waits in the soil, close enough to touch, but never fully returning. A pattern begins to appear, not sharply, but with the slow certainty of stars emerging through dusk. You do not see it all at once. You notice a number, then a transfer, then a broken sequence, then a repeated image of descent, flood, rebuilding, and order returned. The mind begins arranging fragments into a structure, because human beings have always been restless architects of meaning. The system of 8 is not a tablet lying complete in the dust. It is not a museum label with clean lettering and a confident date. It is a reconstruction, a way of listening to several ancient patterns at the same time. Cities receive kingship. Rulers stand before and beyond catastrophe. Sacred spaces rise over older spaces. Water destroys and renews. Fire transforms matter. Gardens promise order. Silence swallows names. The sequence does not behave like a modern chart, but it does breathe like a mythic machine. You stand in an imagined scribal room where several tablets rest on a reed mat. One holds a king list, another preserves a hymn, another records barley rations, another names cities that once mattered terribly to someone. Dust floats in the lamp glow. Outside, the evening wind presses softly against the doorway cloth. The room smells of clay, oil smoke, old reeds, and human concentration. Records confirm that ancient Mesopotamian scribes loved lists, categories, ordered sequences, and inherited formulas. Scholars at Chicago, Yale, and Oxford have studied lexical lists, royal lists, god lists, city lists, and school exercises that train scribes to arrange the world through writing. To the Sumerian and later Mesopotamian mind, listing was not dull clerical work. It was a way of making reality manageable. That matters deeply here. The idea of 8 civilizations before ours grows from a culture that already thought in structured sequences. A list could connect heaven, city, king, temple, animal, field, measure, and worker. It could teach a student how the world was named. It could also teach a society how the past should be remembered. Order on clay becomes order in the mind. You look at the number 8 as if it were a small object in your palm. It is balanced, divisible, and suggestive. In many ancient cultures, numbers carried more than quantity. They could hold pattern, sacred meaning, completeness, direction, or repetition. The Sumerians used numerical systems with impressive sophistication, including sexagesimal counting that later influenced time and geometry. Nobody needed modern mysticism to notice that numbers can organize the invisible. The eightfold system, then, should be approached with care. It is not a verified prehistoric census. It is a symbolic framework drawn from recurring themes within Sumerian and Mesopotamian tradition. Each civilization represents a threshold in the making of ordered human life: water settlement, stone foundation, flood survival, sky watching, garden cultivation, silent maintenance, firecraft, pre-written administration, together. They form a slow ascent toward the world the tablets finally illuminate. A mainstream fact rests beneath this framework. Mesopotamian texts often organize memory through cosmic and political sequence, especially by connecting divine authority with cities and rulers. Research from major universities has shown that royal ideology used older traditions to legitimize present power. Ancient lists were never neutral. They arranged time in ways that made authority appear ancient, sacred, and inevitable. You can almost hear a scribe explaining this with perfect seriousness while sharpening his reed. Kingship did not simply happen. It descended. Cities did not simply compete. They received, lost, and passed on power. The present ruler did not merely win. He stood inside a chain reaching back to a time beyond ordinary memory. Very convenient, naturally, but also very beautiful in its own severe way. The quirky fringe tidbit enters quietly. Some modern interpreters insist that 8 lost civilizations must correspond to exact hidden epochs, ruled by beings from outside ordinary humanity. They arrange the ancient names into secret calendars, celestial cycles, or vanished races. Academic historians do not accept those claims as established fact. Yet the impulse reveals something worth noticing. People sense that the tablets describe time as layered, and they try to give each layer a face. The open scholarly debate is more grounded, but no less fascinating. Researchers still discuss how myth, political memory, environmental experience, and real early settlement history are combined in Mesopotamian traditions. Some treat pre-flood material mainly as theology. Others allow that ancient stories may preserve distorted memories of old centers, disasters, migrations, and social transformations. The boundary between myth and memory remains difficult to draw cleanly, especially when the sources themselves were copied across centuries. You turn from one tablet to another. The King List offers succession, the flood tale offers rupture, temple layers offer continuity. Administrative tablets offer the machinery of daily order. Myths of creation offer a reason for human labor. Each one is incomplete alone. Together, they suggest a world where civilization is not born once, but repeatedly assembled from older parts. This is the heart of the system. Civilization does not appear as a single dawn. It appears as a series of awakenings, each one partial, each one vulnerable. People settle, build, survive, observe, cultivate, maintain, transform, and administer. These are not merely technical stages, they are spiritual changes in how humans understand their place in the world. The first threshold asks how humans remain near water without being taken by it. The second asks how memory becomes fixed in earth and stone. The third asks how survival becomes story. The fourth asks how the heavens impose rhythm on fear. The fifth asks how abundance can be tended without becoming a prison. The sixth asks whether nameless lives are still civilization. The seventh asks what happens when humans learn to transform matter. The eighth asks how marks, seals, and systems begin to govern the living. Each question is old, each still belongs to you. Perhaps that is why the system feels unsettling. It is not only about lost peoples, it is about processes that never ended. Modern cities still depend on water, foundations, disaster memory, calendars, agriculture, invisible labour, technology, and administration. You're not outside the sequence, you're inside its latest room. Surrounded by older rooms beneath the floor, a soft philosophical thought arrives here. Perhaps ancient people did not imagine the past as primitive in the way modern people often do. Perhaps they imagined it as powerful, sacred, dangerous, and partially lost. Their oldest kings are not smaller than later kings. They are larger, stranger, almost unbearable. Their earlier cities are not dismissed as crude. They are placed near the descent of heavenly order. That reversal matters. The hidden timeline moves backward into greatness, not upward from foolishness alone. For the Sumerian imagination, antiquity could mean closeness to the divine source. The farther back one looked, the more immense the world became. Time was not merely progress. Time was distance from a beginning too bright to see clearly. You sit in the scribal room as night deepens, a lamp flame trembles and recovers. The tablets lie still, each holding its own narrow piece of order. They do not announce 8 civilizations. They do not deny them either. They offer a broken architecture of memory, and the mind walks through it carefully, step by step, refusing both blind belief and easy dismissal. The system of 8 is best understood as a forgotten diagram drawn in shadow. It shows how human order may have risen through cycles, not once, but again and again. It shows how water, stone, flood, stars, gardens, silence, fire, and writing form a chain of thresholds. It shows that our civilization may be less an isolated miracle than a late arrangement of very old human habits. The lamp burns lower. The clay darkens. The room grows cooler. Somewhere outside, a canal moves through the night with soft persistence. The scribe covers the tablets and leaves them in order, because order is his defense against forgetting, and in that careful arrangement, the eightfold system continues to turn, quiet as a wheel beneath the sleeping earth. A quieter question now waits at the centre of the clay. It is not only what came first, or how many ages rose and faded, it is more personal than that, and more uncomfortable. Why are humans here at all? In the Sumerian imagination, humanity does not step proudly onto the stage as the obvious hero. Humanity arrives carrying a basket. That is not very flattering, but it is memorable. You find yourself in a world where the gods are imagined as powerful, demanding, and strangely administrative. They eat through offerings. They receive clothing, music, incense, beer, bread, animals, and praise. Their temples need fields. Their fields need canals. Their canals need maintenance. Behind the sacred brightness of divine order, there is work. So much work. Someone must dig, carry, grind, bake, weave, pour, repair, and remember. In Sumerian and later Mesopotamian creation traditions, human beings are often linked with labour on behalf of the gods. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied these myths as religious literature and as reflections of temple-centred society. The stories do not describe humanity as accidental. They describe humanity as useful, formed into a world already structured by divine need and cosmic hierarchy. You stand in a temple courtyard before sunrise. The bricks are cool underfoot. A faint grey light gathers along the walls. Workers arrive quietly, some still heavy with sleep. A priest checks offerings. A baker kneads dough. A brewer tends jars. A sweeper clears dust from the threshold with careful strokes. The god has not appeared. Yet the god's household is already awake. The scent is thick and layered. Barley mash, warm bread, wool, lamp oil, damp clay, and the first thread of incense mingle in the air. A bronze bowl catches the pale light. Birds call from the roofline. Somewhere, a donkey objects to existence with admirable consistency. The sacred day begins with chores, which feels painfully believable. The mainstream fact here is clear. Temples in ancient Mesopotamia were not only religious spaces, they were economic institutions that owned land, managed goods, employed workers, and organised offerings. Administrative tablets record rations, deliveries, labour assignments, animals, textiles, and grain. The divine household was a real social structure, not merely a poetic idea floating above ordinary life. This makes the creation stories more powerful. When a myth says humans were made to serve, it is not speaking from an abstract universe. It is speaking from a society where service, hierarchy, and obligation shaped daily existence. The human being is placed between clay and heaven, humble in origin, necessary in function, and forever caught between reverence and exhaustion. You imagine the myth unfolding in a low voice. The gods grow weary of labour. A decision is made. Humanity is fashioned, sometimes from clay, sometimes with divine elements, sometimes through ritual acts that blur earth and spirit. The new creature stands small before vast powers. It is given breath, purpose, and burden. It does not receive a throne. It receives a task. This is the strange dignity of the Sumerian human. To serve is not only to be low, it is to be woven into the maintenance of the cosmos. Every loaf, every canal cut, every offering, every measured basket of grain helps keep the divine and human worlds aligned. The work is heavy, but it matters. That is either comforting or deeply suspicious, depending on how much sleep you have had. A quirky fringe tidbit appears here like a lamp flame bending in a draught. Some modern writers claim that Sumerian myths describe humans being engineered as a worker species by powerful beings mistaken for gods. Serious scholars do not treat that as the plain meaning of the texts. They read the stories through language, ritual, social history, and theology. Still, the fringe version keeps returning because the old myths do portray humanity as made for labour, and that detail is difficult to ignore. The open scholarly debate is more careful. Researchers continue asking how these creation accounts reflect ancient labour systems, temple ideology, and ideas about divine justice. Some view them as theological explanations for why humans must work and die. Others see social commentary hidden inside sacred narrative, perhaps acknowledging the burden of common people under large institutions. Another perspective treats the myths as ritual philosophy, showing that human service sustains order against chaos. The clay leaves room for all these readings. You watch workers move through the courtyard in a slow rhythm. They do not look like symbols. They look like people. One rubs his shoulder, one laughs softly at a private joke, one carries a basket with practiced balance. A woman adjusts a cloth around her hair before entering a storeroom. They are tired, skilled, observant, and necessary. Humanity's role in the hidden timeline becomes clearer. The earlier thresholds create the world humans must inhabit. Water teaches dependence. Stone teaches permanence. Flood teaches fear. Stars teach order. Gardens teach cultivation. Silence teaches maintenance. Fire teaches transformation. Administration teaches obligation. Then the myths explain why human beings belong inside that arrangement. They are the hands of the system. That idea is unsettling because it reduces human pride, yet it also expands human importance. The gods may command, but they do not clean the courtyard. They do not dredge the canal. They do not grind barley until the wrists ache. Divine order depends on human bodies. Heaven in these stories has outsourced its housekeeping. The sarcasm is gentle, but the point is serious. Ancient religion often makes labour sacred without making it easy. A worker may still be hungry, a ration may still be unfair, a canal bank may still collapse, a priest may still demand perfection from someone whose back already hurts. Sacred purpose does not erase social inequality. Sometimes it explains it too well. You step inside a storeroom where jars line the wall. Each jar carries a mark. Each mark belongs to a chain of responsibility. Grain from a field becomes offering, ration, debt, feast, or seed. Nothing is simple once it enters the system. The human being becomes part of the circulation, both receiver and provider, servant and sustainer. Perhaps this is why the old creation stories feel so different from modern heroic myths. They do not begin by saying that people are free to become anything. They begin by saying people are placed into a vast order already older than themselves. Freedom, if it exists, must be found within duty, not outside it. That is a heavy thought. But ancient knights were made for heavy thoughts. You feel the clay beneath the myth. In Mesopotamian tradition, humans are often linked with earth, moulded substance, and mortal fragility. Clay is humble. It cracks, dries, breaks, and dissolves. Yet clay also receives writing. It becomes brick, vessel, tablet, and figurine. To be made of clay is not only to be weak, it is to be shapeable, useful, and capable of carrying memory. That may be the softest hidden truth. Humanity is not the first power in the sequence, but humanity becomes the remembering power. The rivers do not write their own floods. Stones do not name their builders. Stars do not explain their omens. Fire does not record its discoveries. Humans do. Small, mortal. Overworked humans press meaning into clay and make the older ages visible. The courtyard brightens. The offering bread is carried inward. Incense rises in a pale column. The workers lower their voices as ritual begins. For a moment, labour becomes ceremony. The ordinary basket, the jar, the broom, the loaf, and the tablet all belong to one careful movement between earth and heaven. Perhaps humans were created to serve. Perhaps humans invented that explanation to survive service. Perhaps both ideas live together in the same temple shadow. And as you stand there, breathing the scent of bread and smoke, humanity's role remains beautifully uncertain, clayborn, burdened, necessary, and still quietly asking why. Rain begins far away, beyond your sight, beyond the low houses and the familiar fields. You do not see the first drop strike the distant hills. You do not hear the first hillside stream thicken and turn brown. Yet the water has already begun its journey toward the plain, gathering strength in places where no one in the settlement can stand and argue with it. That is the frightening patience of catastrophe. It often begins somewhere else. You stand near the river at evening, where the air is heavy and strangely warm. The reeds bend without much wind. Insects hum above dark pools. A fisherman pulls his boat higher onto the bank, not because anyone has ordered him, but because some small instinct has moved inside him. The river has changed its sound. It is fuller now, deeper in the throat. The great flood tradition rises from this kind of listening. In Sumerian and later Mesopotamian literature, a flood divides the world of ancient rulers from the world that follows. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied these flood accounts as religious memory, literary inheritance, and reflections of real riverine danger. They belong to myth, but myth here is not an escape from reality. It is reality carried in a larger vessel. You watch the settlement prepare without yet admitting fear. Jars are moved to higher shelves. Animals are brought closer. Children are told to stay near the doorway, which of course makes the doorway suddenly less interesting to them. A woman secures a bundle of wool under a roof beam. A man checks the small boat tied beside the wall. No one wants to be dramatic. The river may still settle, but the river does not settle. The first water enters the low field at night. It spreads quietly, silver under the moon, slipping along furrows meant for irrigation. At first, it almost looks useful. Then it crosses the boundary stones. Then it reaches the path. The familiar lines of ownership, labour, and memory begin to disappear under one shining surface. The world becomes simpler and far more dangerous. A mainstream fact anchors the fear beneath your feet. Southern Mesopotamia was an alluvial landscape shaped by flooding, river shifts, and sedimentation. Archaeological excavations have found flood deposits at certain ancient sites. though scholars do not treat them as evidence for one universal flood covering the entire Earth. The evidence points toward powerful local and regional events, later transformed by storytelling into cosmic rupture. That transformation matters. When a flood destroys your known world, it does not need to destroy every world to feel absolute. If the road is gone, the graves are gone, the fields are gone, and the neighbour's house floats past in pieces, then for you, the world has ended. Myth does not exaggerate emotion. It gives emotion a stage large enough to stand on. The water rises through the night. Dogs bark from rooftops. Goats complain from platforms with magnificent lack of perspective. People carry children, baskets, tools, and tablets toward higher ground. A clay jar breaks against a post, releasing grain that vanishes instantly into the current. Someone cries out for a name you do not know, and the darkness does not answer. This is the dividing moment. Before the flood, the old timeline carries enormous rains, sacred cities, and strange rulers who stand in mythic distance. Beyond the flood, memory becomes more human, more political, more measurable. The flood is a blade drawn across time. It cuts one kind of past away from another. A quirky fringe tidbit moves through this water, like a half-seen log. Some modern interpreters argue that the flood story preserves the destruction of an advanced civilization whose survivors became the teachers of later peoples. Scholars do not accept that as proven by the tablets. They point to literary tradition, environmental experience, and theological meaning. Yet the idea persists because flood stories naturally create survivors, and survivors naturally become bearers of forbidden memory. The scholarly debate is quieter, but deeply alive. Researchers continue to ask how Mesopotamian flood narratives relate to actual flood deposits, regional environmental change, oral tradition, and literary borrowing. Some emphasize the role of scribble schools in preserving and reshaping the tale. Others examine how the flood functions as a boundary between divine decision and human kingship. The exact balance between remembered disaster and theological design remains unresolved. You stand on the highest mound as dawn begins. Below, the settlement has become a broken reflection of the sky. Roofs rise from water like small islands. A pen floats loose, turning slowly. A basket catches against a wall, then tears free. The current carries straw, jars, reeds, branches, and pieces of doors. The eye searches for order and finds only movement. Yet even here, order tries to survive. People gather in clusters. They share dry bread. They tie boats together. They count who is present, then count again. Because numbers feel like control even when the heart knows better. Someone saves a small tablet wrapped in cloth. Someone else saves a cooking pot. Memory and hunger both have claims. The flood changes more than land. It changes trust. People who survive such a disaster may never again believe that the world is stable. They may rebuild, because human beings are stubborn beyond reason, but they rebuild with a new shadow inside them. Every riverbank becomes a question. Every dark cloud becomes an omen. Every old story of destruction becomes easier to believe. This is why the flood divides memory. It teaches that civilization is not a possession, but a temporary arrangement. Walls stand until water finds them. Fields feed until silt buries them. Records endure until shelves collapse. Kings command until the river takes the road to the palace. Nature does not need rebellion. It only needs height. In the old stories, divine will often stands behind the waters. The flood may come because humans are noisy, numerous, disobedient, or simply caught inside decisions made above them. To modern ears, that may feel severe. To ancient people, it may have made disaster intelligible. Random suffering is almost unbearable. Divine anger, however frightening, at least suggests a pattern. You watch a survivor kneel beside the receding water days later. Mud covers everything. Fish-lined courtyards. Walls lean at odd angles. A child finds a familiar cup half buried near a doorway and holds it as if it were treasure. The simplest object can become sacred when it returns from destruction. The Great Flood does not end the human story. It reorganizes it. It turns earlier ages into a before world, wrapped in distance and awe. It turns survivors into carriers of renewal. It makes rebuilding feel like creation, not repair. It teaches later scribes to think of time as broken, with one world drowned and another beginning in the wet silence. Perhaps this is the deepest meaning of the flood in the hidden timeline. It is not only water, it is the moment when memory learns to divide itself. Before, there is vastness. After, there is inheritance. Before, kings almost belong to the divine. After, humans walk through mud, count losses, and begin again. Evening returns over the ruined plain. The waters have lowered, leaving shining pools and long scars of silt. Frogs call from places where grain once grew. Smoke rises from a repaired hearth. Someone presses fresh clay into a crack in the wall. Someone else tells the children how high the water came, and the children listen wide-eyed, already turning fear into story. The flood that divided memory remains there, not only in tablets, but in the human sense that every known world can be interrupted. It rests in the mud line on a wall. It rests in the rescued jar. It rests in the survivor's voice, soft and tired, saying that there was a time before the water, and there is this time now. And between those two times, the old world drifts away, carrying its forgotten civilizations into the deep brown silence. The clay grows harder at the broken edge, where certainty begins to fail. You stand not in an ancient courtyard now, but in a quiet research room, where tablets lie on padded supports under careful light. The air smells faintly of paper, dust, gloves, and old cabinets. Outside, the modern city moves with glass, traffic, and impatient footsteps. Inside, time slows to the pace of a scholar reading one damaged sign. This is where the mystery meets discipline. A tablet does not become true because it is old. That is an important and slightly inconvenient rule. Ancient people could misunderstand, exaggerate, praise, flatter, invent, copy badly, or repeat traditions they themselves did not fully grasp. Age gives a text value, but it does not make every sentence literal. The clay is precious, not magically obedient. You watch a researcher lean toward a fragment. The tablet is chipped along one side, and several lines are missing. A sign may be read one way, unless the broken wedge belonged to another sign entirely. A royal name appears, then vanishes into damage. A number survives, but its context does not. The past is not being coy for entertainment. It is simply broken. Records confirm that cuneiform studies depend on comparing copies, signs, languages, archaeological context, and parallel text. Scholars at the University of Chicago, Yale, Oxford, and the University of Pennsylvania have spent generations building dictionaries, sign lists, museum catalogues, and translations. Their work is patient, technical, and often less glamorous than television would prefer. No one dramatically blows dust from a tablet anymore, mostly because conservators enjoy sleep. The mainstream historical fact here is firm. The Sumerian tablets are real, the king lists are real, the flood traditions are real, and the early cities of southern Mesopotamia are archaeologically confirmed. What is not confirmed is a literal sequence of 8 lost civilizations ruling the world before Sumer. That distinction matters. It protects the evidence from being swallowed by fantasy, while still allowing ancient imagination to be taken seriously. You feel the calm tension in that distinction. On one side, there is the solid ground of excavation. Pottery types, radiocarbon dates, building layers, seal impressions, botanical remains, human bones, animal bones, and administrative archives. On the other side, there are myths of divine councils, impossible rains, sacred descent, and a flood that changes the shape of memory. The scholar stands between them, not as a gatekeeper of wonder, but as someone trying not to lie to the dead, that is harder than it sounds. A researcher may spend years on a single group of tablets, only to produce a cautious conclusion with 3 possible readings and a polite warning. The public often wants certainty. The evidence usually offers weather. One fragment suggests a ritual, another complicates it. A later copy changes a word, a site report adds a layer. A new excavation reopens a question everyone hoped was finished. History is not a stone wall. It is a reed fence in wind. A quirky fringe tidbit approaches this research room wearing sandals full of confidence. Some popular books insist that professional scholars hide the real meaning of Sumerian tablets because the truth would overturn history. The claim is dramatic, and drama sells nicely. In reality, Assyriologists publish disagreements constantly, often in articles so specialized that only 7 people and 1 very dedicated librarian may read them. Suppression is not needed when the grammar is difficult enough. Still, suspicion has emotional roots. Museums can feel distant. Academic language can feel cold. Ancient texts can seem locked behind expertise. When ordinary listeners hear that tablets speak of gods, pre-flood kings, creation, and strange beings, they naturally ask whether something has been softened or dismissed. That question deserves respect, even when the answer requires caution. The open scholarly debate lies not in whether aliens or hidden empires built Sumer, but in how deep the memories inside these texts may go. Some scholars read pre-flood traditions mainly as royal ideology, designed to legitimize later rule. Others suggest that parts of the tradition may preserve transformed memories of early settlements, environmental disruptions, old occult centers, or social changes before writing became common. The debate remains unresolved because memory and myth are intertwined like roots under a riverbank. You look at a tablet through glass. Its broken side resembles a small cliff. The signs are not romantic from a distance. They are practical marks, compact and severe. Yet each mark has travelled farther than any person who made it. Empires rose above it and fell. Languages changed. Cities burned. Rivers shifted. The tablet stayed. Damaged but not silent. The scholar does not ask the tablet to reveal everything. She asks it to reveal something. A name, a place, a phrase, a pattern, a scribal habit, a mathematical system, an error that shows how students learned, a repeated formula that shows how tradition moved. This modest method may seem less thrilling than grand claims, but it is stronger. It lets the past remain strange without turning it into a puppet. You notice how many kinds of knowledge must gather around one fragment. Archaeology gives the layer. Philology gives the words. History gives the context. Anthropology gives questions about society. Environmental science gives river, soil, crop, and climate. Museum conservation protects the object. Digital imaging may reveal signs that ordinary light hides. The tablet becomes a meeting place for many careful disciplines. That is the modern council around the clay. At the broken edge, scholars also argue about translation. One word may carry religious meaning in one passage and administrative meaning in another. A divine name may appear in a formula shaped by centuries of copying. A city name may be real, symbolic, or both. A number may belong to counting, ritual, exaggeration, or inherited tradition. The ancient scribe knew his world. You inherit only pieces of it. This uncertainty should not make the story smaller. It should make it quieter. A mystery that survives careful study is more powerful than one created by ignoring evidence. When historians say, "We do not know," they are not closing a door. They are refusing to paint a fake landscape on the wall and call it the horizon. You sit in the research room as evening dims the windows. The tablets remain under small pools of light. Around them are notebooks, photographs, catalogues, pencils, and the faint scratch of someone writing a comment in the margin. This modern silence is different from ancient silence. It is chosen. concentrated, protective. The 8 civilizations, at this scholarly edge, become less like a secret fact and more like a guided meditation on origins. They invite you to explore what Sumerian tradition suggests about layered time, inherited order, and the fear that civilization rests upon older forgotten worlds. The responsible path does not flatten the tablets into modern certainty. It lets them remain ancient. Perhaps that is the deeper respect. Not to force the clay to say what pleases us, not to drain it of wonder either, to hold both caution and imagination in the same hand, as gently as a tablet fragment that could crumble under pressure. The scholar turns off one lamp, another remains glowing over the clay. The room grows darker at the edges, just as the path does, yet the broken signs still wait in their circle of light, neither fully revealed nor fully hidden, and there, where proof ends and listening begins, the old tablets continue to breathe. A story rarely stays where it is born. It travels like seed caught in wool, like smoke slipping under a door, like a song hummed by someone who has forgotten where the first singer stood. You follow the old Sumerian fragments as they move beyond their first clay homes, passing into later languages, later kingdoms, and later imaginations that reshape them without entirely letting them go. The air around you becomes a corridor of libraries. Shelves rise in shadow. Tablets lie in baskets, boxes, and ruined archive rooms. A scribe copies an older text in a new hand. Another scribe adapts a divine name into a language his grandfather may not have spoken. A student recites lines aloud, stumbling, correcting himself, and secretly hoping the teacher is in a forgiving mood. This is how ancient memory survives, not by remaining pure, but by being useful enough to copy. Records confirm that many Sumerian traditions were preserved and reworked by Akkadian-speaking Babylonians and Assyrians. Scholars at Yale, Chicago, Oxford, and the University of Pennsylvania have shown how Sumerian literature remained central in scribal education long after Sumerian ceased to be a common spoken language. The language became learned, prestigious, and sacred, a little like an ancient classroom ghost that refused to leave. You stand inside a scribal school where young students practice old signs. Clay tablets are stacked near the wall. The room smells of damp earth, reed, sweat, and lamp smoke. A teacher recites a phrase. Students repeat it. Some understand deeply. Some imitate sound before meaning. This, too, is tradition. Even misunderstanding can carry a vessel across time. The echoes move into Babylonian literature. The flood survivor receives a new name and a different literary setting. The ancient story of a world-drowning catastrophe becomes part of a larger epic meditation on kingship, mortality, friendship, and the limits placed upon human life. The old waters remain, but their emotional colour changes. A Sumerian memory becomes Babylonian wisdom. A mainstream fact rests clearly here. The Epic of Gilgamesh, known from Akkadian tablets found in places such as Nineveh, includes a flood account related to older Mesopotamian traditions. Modern scholars compare these versions to trace how stories developed across centuries. The relationship is not simple copying in the lazy sense. It is inheritance, transformation, and careful literary craft. You hear the flood story spoken in a royal library. The voice is slow, formal, and trained. It tells of warning, building, storm, destruction, birds sent out over water, and life beginning again. The listeners know the outline. Perhaps they still listen. Great stories do not survive because nobody knows what happens. They survive because everyone does, and still needs to hear it again. The echoes travel farther. Later Hebrew traditions also contain a flood narrative, garden imagery, creation themes, divine speech, human labour, and a world shaped by sacred order. Scholars continue to study connections and differences between Mesopotamian and biblical traditions, especially through the ancient Near Eastern background of early texts. These links do not make one tradition a simple copy of another. They show that peoples of the ancient world shared, argued with, and reshaped deep narrative material. You walk through a night market in an imagined city where merchants speak several tongues: wool, copper, cedar, grain, oil, lapis, stories, and rumours all move along the same routes. A trader may carry goods in a boat and a tale in his mouth. A captive may bring a prayer. A marriage may carry a household custom across a border. A scribe may translate what cannot be translated cleanly, then pretend it is fine. Culture moves this way, untidy and alive. A quirky fringe tidbit appears among these travelling stories. Some modern enthusiasts claim that every ancient myth is really a distorted record of one worldwide lost civilization, with Sumer as the main archive of its collapse. Academic researchers are far more cautious. They see networks, borrowing, shared human concerns, and regional histories, not one single hidden script behind everything. Still, the temptation is understandable. When similar themes appear across cultures, the mind wants one master key for all locked doors, but ancient echoes need not come from one source to be meaningful. People everywhere ask why humans suffer, why work exists, why floods come, why gardens are lost, why death cannot be avoided, and why rulers claim to stand near heaven. Similar questions can create similar shapes. Contact between cultures can then sharpen those shapes and send them travelling. The open scholarly debate remains active around the pathways of influence. Some researchers emphasize direct literary borrowing between Mesopotamian and later traditions. Others speak of wider shared cultural environments, where themes circulated through trade, conquest, exile, translation, and oral performance. Another view stresses independent adaptation, because each culture shaped inherited material to answer its own religious and social questions. The truth may be a woven thing, with no single strand strong enough alone. You notice how the eightfold pattern changes when it travels. Water settlement may become sacred homeland. Stone foundations may become temple mountains or holy cities. Flood survival becomes covenant, warning, or immortal memory. Sky watching becomes omen, calendar, and divine sign. Garden abundance becomes paradise and exile. Silence becomes genealogy gaps and vanished peoples. Firecraft becomes forbidden knowledge or divine gift. Administration becomes law, tablets, judgment, a measured duty. The fragments do not remain frozen. They dress themselves for new listeners. This is why later myths can feel both familiar and unfamiliar. They carry old Mesopotamian dust in their hems, but they walk with different steps. A garden in one tradition may not mean exactly what a fertile enclosure meant in another. A flood survivor may serve different theology in different texts. A divine counsel may shift shape as religious ideas change. The echo remains, but the room alters the sound. You pause beside a doorway where a scribe has left a tablet to dry. On it, an old tale has been copied in a newer language. The signs look confident, but the tradition behind them is layered. The scribe may not know every earlier form. He does not need to. He participates in continuity by doing the work in front of him. He keeps the echo moving. That is the quiet marvel. Ancient stories do not require perfect preservation to survive. They require enough recognition. A flood remains a flood. A garden remains a place of longing. A divine command remains a question about duty. A first city remains a memory of order. A lost age remains a shadow behind the known one. The echoes also change the way humanity sees itself. In one telling, humans are servants made to relieve divine labour. In another, humans are moral creatures tested by obedience, knowledge, and mortality. In another, humans are survivors, rebuilt from catastrophe. Each version asks the listener to stand in a different place beneath the same ancient sky. You feel the corridor of libraries grow quieter. Some archives burn. Some tablets crack. Some stories are translated onto parchment, then paper, then printed pages, then glowing screens held in tired modern hands at midnight. The route is astonishing. A mark made in wet clay becomes a question whispered to someone thousands of years later, perhaps to you, in a dark room where sleep is beginning to gather. A story has travelled that far. It deserves a little respect. The Sumerian fragments do not remain locked in Sumer. They seep into later Babylonian grandeur, Assyrian libraries, Hebrew sacred memory, classical curiosity, modern scholarship, and popular imagination. At every stage, people ask the same quiet question in a new accent. What came before us, and what did those earlier people know? The answer changes, the question endures, and in those wandering echoes, the 8 forgotten civilizations become less like ruins on a map, and more like recurring shapes in human memory, rising wherever people dream of a world before their own. The ground opens only a little, and even that feels like a privilege. A trench cuts down through the mound in careful steps, exposing bands of earth that look plain at first glance. Brown, grey, reddish-brown, pale ash, darker clay, crushed brick, a line of charcoal, a floor hardened by feet no longer walking. To an impatient eye, it is dirt. To archaeology, it is a sentence written in layers. You stand beside the trench at dawn, when the air is cool and the shadows inside the cut are deep. A brush moves softly over a patch of soil. A trowel scrapes with a thin metallic sound. No one speaks loudly. The past here is not awakened by shouting. It is coaxed upward grain by grain, as if even the earth must be persuaded to remember. The archaeology of absence begins with this strange humility. You do not find what you want, you find what survived. A wall may remain because it burned and hardened. A wooden beam may vanish because time ate it without ceremony. A basket disappears, while its impression in mud endures. A person's name is lost, while the shape of their storage jar remains in broken pieces around a collapsed room. Records from major excavations in Mesopotamia confirm that ancient sites are uneven archives. Research traditions at Chicago, Pennsylvania, Harvard, and Oxford have shown that settlement layers can be disturbed by erosion, later construction, looting, burrowing animals, groundwater, salt, and ancient rebuilding. The ruins are not quiet libraries. They are damaged rooms after thousands of years of weather, politics, and unfortunate goats. You look down at a floor surface revealed in the trench. It is not spectacular. There is no gold mask, no royal throne, no dramatic skeleton pointing helpfully toward a secret chamber. There is a patch of packed clay, a scatter of ash, a few potsherds, and a stain where something organic once decayed. Yet this ordinary surface may be more honest than treasure. It shows where life actually rested. A mainstream fact supports the scene clearly. Archaeologists reconstruct ancient societies through material remains such as pottery, architecture, plant remains, animal bones, tools, ceilings, and soil chemistry. These traces can reveal diet, trade, craft production, settlement size, environmental change, and social organization. They cannot always reveal personal thought, spoken language, or the full meaning of ritual. Evidence speaks, but it speaks with a damaged mouth. This is where absence becomes active. It does not merely leave blanks, it shapes the story. If a settlement used perishable materials, it may seem poorer or simpler than it was. If elites built in durable forms, they may dominate the record unfairly. If an archive survives by accident, one institution may look more central than it truly was. Archaeology is always negotiating with survival bias, which is just a scholarly way of saying time has favourites. You move along the trench wall where several layers meet. One band contains ash and burned brick, another holds clean silt, perhaps from flooding, another shows rebuilding above destruction. The layers do not explain themselves, but they offer rhythm, occupation, damage, renewal, abandonment, return. Human history looks less like a straight road and more like a house repaired during a storm. A quirky fringe tidbit appears at the trench edge wearing a hat it probably bought online. Some claim that missing layers prove a deliberately hidden civilization was erased from official history. The idea has a satisfying drama, because a gap becomes a conspiracy and a broken wall becomes evidence of suppression. Archaeologists usually respond with less glamorous causes, such as erosion, incomplete excavation, later disturbance, and the simple cruelty of time. Still, absence does feel suspicious when the heart wants a complete tale. The open scholarly debate is more careful and more interesting. Researchers continue to argue over how much can be inferred from incomplete settlement data. Some believe regional surveys can reveal broad demographic patterns, showing expansion, contraction, and shifts in political control. Others warn that survey visibility changes with pottery style, erosion, soil cover, and modern land use. The question remains open because the ground itself does not preserve all periods equally. You kneel near a tray of small finds. There is a bead, a bit of bone, a clay ceiling, a chipped blade, and a lump of fired material that might be slag. Each object is labelled, bagged, and given a context number. The process may look unromantic, but it is a form of reverence. Without context, an artifact becomes an orphan with no address. The bead is especially quiet. It may have decorated a garment, hung at a throat, or fallen from a child's hand. It may have travelled far before reaching this mound. It may have been treasured, traded, copied, or ignored. The bead cannot say, yet its material, shape, and wear can suggest roots of exchange and habits of adornment. Even beauty becomes data, which feels slightly rude, but very useful. The archaeology of absence teaches you to respect what is not found. No palace in a layer may mean no palace existed, or it may mean the palace lies unexcavated, eroded, reused, or misidentified. No written tablets may mean people did not write, or that they wrote on perishable materials, or that archives were removed, destroyed, or never stored where archaeologists dug. Silence has many causes, and certainty is often the least qualified guest at the table. A wind moves across the site, carrying dust into the trench. Someone covers an exposed surface with cloth. Another worker photographs the section before the light changes. A supervisor studies a drawing board and frowns with the ancient expression of someone whose evidence has become inconvenient. This is how knowledge grows, not through perfect discovery, but through disciplined frustration. You begin to understand why ruins can be more powerful than complete answers. A perfect record might satisfy curiosity, then close the door. A broken record keeps the mind awake. It asks what vanished. It asks who is missing. It asks why one house survived while another dissolved. It asks whether a lost people can be honoured without being turned into fantasy. The eightfold hidden timeline rests partly on this archaeology of absence. Water leaves silt, stone leaves foundations, flood leaves deposits, skywatching leaves alignments and tablets when lucky, gardens leave seeds, pollen, canals, and salt in the soil. Silent workers leave thresholds and ration lists. Fire leaves kilns, slag, and burned clay. Administration leaves ceilings and tablets. Each threshold is visible in traces, yet never complete. The ground gives enough to suggest patterns, but not enough to end wonder. As the sun rises higher, the trench warms. The smell of dust deepens. A worker lifts another sherd and places it carefully in a tray. It is small, curved, and reddish, with a darkened edge. Perhaps it belonged to a cooking pot. Perhaps it touched a meal eaten on an ordinary evening, while someone complained about work, laughed at a child, and worried about rain. That is civilization too. The archaeology of absence reminds you that history is built from both survival and loss. Every museum case is surrounded by things that did not endure. Every translated tablet stands beside countless unwritten voices. Every excavated wall rises from a city mostly gone. The past is not hidden in one secret chamber. It is dispersed through fragments, stains, layers, and careful doubt. By late afternoon, the trench lies in shadow again. The exposed floors look calm, almost sleepy. The workers cover fragile areas, close notebooks, and leave the mound to the wind. Nothing has been solved completely. Something has been understood a little better. That is the honest rhythm of excavation. And beneath the covered layers, under the broken bricks and missing rooms, the absent civilizations remain present in the only way time allows them, as spaces where the earth remembers more than it can say. The night grows softer around the old questions, and the mind begins to turn inward. You are no longer searching only for cities under mounds or names inside broken tablets. You are listening to the human need that makes such searching feel necessary. Beneath the clay, beneath the river silt, beneath the careful debates of scholars, there is a dream older than any archive. It is the dream of before. Every civilization imagines that something came earlier. Sometimes that earlier thing is wiser, close to the gods, and more whole than the present. Sometimes it is dangerous, corrupt, and properly destroyed. Sometimes it is both at once, because human memory enjoys making things complicated at bedtime. The past becomes a mirror, but an uneven one. You look into it and see not only ancestors, but desires. You sit beside a low lamp in an imagined house, while outside the plain darkens into blue. A child asks where the first people came from. An elder pauses. The answer could be practical, involving parents and grandparents, which would be sensible and deeply disappointing. Instead, the elder speaks of clay, divine breath, older cities, great waters, lost kings, and a world that once stood closer to the beginning. This is how the human dream of before begins. It begins when ordinary life feels too small to explain itself. Records from the study of ancient cultures confirm that origin stories, flood traditions, ancestor tales, and Golden Age myths appear across many societies. Scholars at Stanford, Yale, Oxford, and other major institutions have examined how communities use such stories to explain identity, suffering, authority, landscape, and mortality. These stories do not merely entertain, they organize belonging. A mainstream fact rests quietly here. Sumerian literature and Mesopotamian traditions placed humanity inside a sacred and political order that stretched beyond individual memory. Kingship, temples, floods, divine labour, and ancient cities gave society a past with depth and purpose. The stories helped people understand why their world was structured as it was. They also gave that structure a very impressive ancestry, which rulers must have appreciated. Yet the dream of before does not belong only to kings. It belongs to farmers repairing canals, mothers grinding grain, scribes copying old lines, merchants walking risky roads, and children falling asleep under roofs of reed and clay. Everyone lives inside questions that daily work cannot fully answer. Why must we labour? Why do floods come? Why do rulers command? Why do the dead not return? Why does the world feel inherited? You breathe slowly in the lamplit room. The flame makes the walls tremble. A clay cup warms in your hand. Outside, an animal shifts in its pen. The present is intimate, close, and ordinary. Yet the story being told opens a corridor far behind it, where earlier beings, earlier cities, and earlier disasters move like shapes in smoke. The idea of 8 civilizations before ours is powerful because it gives form to that corridor. It suggests that you're not living near the beginning, but inside a late chamber of a much older house. Other rooms lie behind you. Some are flooded, some are burned, some are silent, some are fragrant with gardens, some hold stones under cold starlight. You cannot enter them fully, but you feel their weight. A quirky fringe tidbit lingers here like a moth near the lamp. Some people believe ancient humans possessed a complete lost knowledge that modern civilization has forgotten, and that old tablets preserve fragments of it in disguise. Scholars remain cautious, and rightly so. Most evidence points to complex human development rather than a single vanished library of perfect wisdom. Still, the longing behind the belief is understandable. Modern life is noisy, clever, and oddly lonely. A lost wisdom sounds restful. Perhaps that is why people return to ancient mysteries at night. The older world feels slower. It feels handmade. Clay, reed, smoke, stone, bread, river, star. These things calm the mind because they seem closer to the body. Yet ancient life was not gentle. It was full of disease, hunger, inequality, fear, and back-breaking labour. Nostalgia likes to sweep the floor before guests arrive. History keeps noticing what was swept into the corner. The open scholarly debate is not whether humans dream of lost beginnings. That is clear enough. The debate concerns how such dreams preserve real memory. Some researchers argue that myths can carry traces of environmental events, migrations, early social structures, and collective trauma. Others warn that stories transform too much over time to be used as straightforward records. A careful middle path treats myth as meaningful evidence, but not simple evidence. You lean into that middle path. It feels honest. It doesn't demand that every ancient story be literal. It also refuses to dismiss old imagination as nonsense. A myth may not tell you exactly what happened. It may tell you what a people feared had happened, believed should have happened, or needed to say had happened for their world to feel bearable. That is not a small thing. The human dream of before often grows strongest during uncertainty. When cities tremble, people imagine earlier ages of order. When rulers fail, they imagine first kings who held divine favour. When fields turn salt white and grain thins, they imagine gardens where water once flowed perfectly. When technology feels dangerous, they imagine a time before fire knowledge escaped its keepers. The past becomes a place where the present can ask questions without being interrupted. You walk now through several imagined scenes, each quiet and incomplete. A marsh worker tells a child about older waters. A stone builder places a hand on a foundation and murmurs a name already ancient to him. A sky watcher records a sign and wonders whether someone watched the same star in a vanished age. A gardener opens a canal at dawn and thinks of a perfect enclosure no one has seen. A scribe copies a king who ruled impossibly long and does not smile. Each one is doing more than remembering. Each one is placing life inside a scale large enough to hold fear. That may be the real purpose of hidden timelines. They make human vulnerability less lonely. If civilizations rose and faded before yours, then loss is not meaningless. It is part of a pattern. Even if the pattern remains unclear, the thought is comforting but only gently. Patterns can soothe, yet they can also trap. If every age rises and falls, what hope does any city have? Perhaps the answer is not escape. Perhaps the answer is attention. The old tablets do not save anyone from time. They only show that someone noticed, recorded, copied, buried, and accidentally endured. You feel the modern world nearby, though it is not named. Its towers, lights, data, machines, and crowded schedules seem very far from the warm clay room, yet the same old dream moves through it. People still search for origins. They still suspect that official beginnings are too neat. They still wonder whether the ground beneath them contains older footsteps. They still ask what was lost before they arrived. This is why the Sumerian tablets continue to hold the imagination. They are not merely old documents. They are proof that earlier people also inherited mysteries. They looked backward and found giants of time, sacred descent, vanished cities, and waters that remade the world. They were ancient to us, but they too felt late. That realization is strangely tender. No generation stands at the center. Each one wakes inside a story already underway. Each one receives broken memories, practical tools, unanswered grief, and a little space to add its own marks. Then it passes the clay onward, whether fired, shattered, translated, or forgotten. The lamp burns lower. The elder's story slows. The child's eyes begin to close, though the old names still drift through the room. Outside, the plain lies under stars that have watched every confident age become archaeology. The silence is not empty. It is patient. Perhaps people imagine earlier worlds because they sense, correctly, that they are made from them, not from lost empires alone, but from older habits, older fears, older labour, older hope. The hidden ancestors beneath the floor are not always royal. Sometimes they are simply human beings who endured long enough for you to wonder about them. And in that wondering, the dream of before continues, soft as dust, deep as sleep, and unfinished as history itself. The tablets rest in darkness again. Although you know they are not asleep in any ordinary sense. They wait on shelves, in museum drawers, in storerooms, in archives, and in the memory of scholars who have spent their lives tracing small wedges across clay. They do not glow. They do not explain themselves. They simply remain, which is sometimes the most ancient kind of speech. You stand in a quiet room where the last light of evening touches the edge of a display case. The tablet inside is cracked across one corner. A line of signs is missing. Another line survives with stubborn clarity. The clay has the colour of old bread. Riverbank mud and desert dust combined. It looks fragile, yet it has outlived palaces, dynasties, languages, and all the confident voices that once believed themselves permanent. This is the strange ending the tablets offer us, not an answer, but endurance. Records from archaeology confirm that thousands of cuneiform tablets have survived from ancient Mesopotamia, preserving administration, literature, law, ritual, mathematics, letters, and royal tradition. Scholars at the University of Pennsylvania, Chicago, Oxford and Tuquila, and Yale have helped study these texts as one of humanity's oldest written archives. The tablets reveal no simple map of 8 proven lost world civilizations. They reveal something quieter, and perhaps more haunting. They reveal that ancient people placed themselves inside vast, layered time. You look through the glass and sense the 8-fold shadow one last time. Water settlement, stone foundation, flood survival, sky watching, garden cultivation, silent maintenance, firecraft, pre-written administration. None stands alone as a fully proven lost empire. Each belongs instead to a threshold of human becoming, a remember's doorway into the world that writing finally catches in its net. The tablet seems small for such weight. That is almost funny. Human beings keep storing enormous fears in tiny objects. A ring, a photograph, a letter, a tooth, a coin, a burned fragment of wood. Here, an entire civilization's backward wonder rests in something that could fit inside 2 hands. If the museum guard were not wisely suspicious of everyone, the mainstream fact remains clear and grounding. Sumer was among the earliest literate urban cultures, and its texts shaped later Mesopotamian traditions for centuries. Its scribes preserved memories of kingship, divine order, flood, labour, cities, and creation. These were not random tales. They were a structured way of thinking about where human society came from, and why it carried such burdens. Yet the fringe tidbit has not vanished. Some still claim the tablets reveal secret masters, hidden races, or visitors from the stars. Scholarship does not support those claims as direct readings of the texts. Still, their popularity shows that the tablets continue to disturb modern certainty. People feel that something older speaks through them, even when they disagree about what that something is. The open scholarly debate stays alive at the edge of the clay. How much ancient memory hides inside myth? How much political design shaped the king lists? How much environmental trauma lives inside flood traditions? How many older cultures were absorbed before writing named them? Researchers answer these questions differently. and the evidence does not allow a final, simple ending. That uncertainty is not failure. It is the shape of the subject. You step outside the museum room in your mind, and the ancient night opens around you. The land between the rivers returns, not as a map, but as a breathing place. Reeds whisper in the marshes. Mud brick walls cool beneath the stars. A canal slides through dark fields. Somewhere, a kiln glows red. Somewhere else, a scribe wipes his stylus clean and prepares another line. The 8 civilizations fade into the landscape, not disappearing completely, but becoming elements. Water moves through one, stone holds another, flood covers a third, stars turn above the 4th, gardens breathe over the 5th, silence shelters the 6th. Fire pulses inside the 7th, clay marks gather at the 8th, where memory becomes visible and begins to call itself history. Perhaps that is the true revelation. Civilization is not a tower rising from nothing. It is sediment. It is layer over layer, habit over habit, fear over hope, invention over repair. Every age inherits older arrangements it barely understands. Every age renames ancient labour as its own beginning. Every age looks down at the ground and wonders why it feels occupied. You listen to the night wind moving across the plain. It has no language. Yet it touches everything that language tried to preserve. It passes over ruined walls, buried floors, temple platforms, graves, canals, and empty courtyards. It lifts dust from places where people once argued about grain, prayed for rain, counted animals, watched stars, and told children that the world had already ended once. But here they were. That thought is tender. It is also slightly unsettling. The story of humanity is not simply progress from darkness into light. It is repeated emergence from forgetting. People build, lose, remember, misunderstand, rebuild, and write. Then later people read, argue, imagine, and dream themselves back into the broken spaces. The tablets do not need to prove every dream to matter. They matter because they show the depth of human memory. They show a people already ancient to us, who still believed in older ages before themselves. They show that the first written civilizations were not free from mystery. They were surrounded by it. They lived inside it, worked inside it, and pressed parts of it into clay. You feel the pace slow now. The case grows dim. The tablet returns to shadow. Its signs remain, but your eyes no longer chase every line. Instead, you let the unanswered questions settle. Were there 8 civilizations before ours? Not as a confirmed list of lost empires, yet as 8 thresholds of memory, 8 deep patterns beneath Sumerian imagination. They remain strangely useful. They let you feel the ancient world as layered, uncertain, and alive beneath the known one. Perhaps that is enough for tonight. Perhaps the clay was never meant to close the question. Perhaps its task was to keep the question from dying. The wind moves softly over the old river plain. The stars hold their cold positions. The buried cities keep their counsel. Somewhere in the earth, a tablet waits with a broken line that no one has read correctly yet. And perhaps the story is not yet complete. Now the scene becomes quieter still. The museum light fades into a softer darkness, and the old plain loosens its hold on your thoughts. You do not need to solve the tablets now. You do not need to decide which fragment is memory, which is myth, and which is only the beautiful confusion of time. The questions can rest beside you like smooth stones in the hand. The rivers continue in the dark, moving past reeds and sleeping banks. Their water carries moonlight in small broken pieces. Far away, a field cools after heat. A kiln loses its red glow. A garden wall holds the last scent of herbs. A roof beneath the stars waits for morning, though morning has no hurry. You may let the 8 shadows drift apart. Water returns to water. Stone returns to silence. Flood becomes a low murmur beyond the fields. Stars become points of calm. Gardens sink into green shade. fire folds itself into ash. Clay closes around its old signs, not hiding them with cruelty, but keeping them safe until another waking mind comes near. There is nothing more you must carry. The ancient world is heavy enough for itself. Its kings can sleep. Its scribes can lower their hands. Its workers can set down their baskets. Its gods, if they remain anywhere in the story, can be left to their distant houses, where incense fades and offerings cool. For now, you're simply here, breathing in the quiet after a long journey through buried time. The past has not vanished, but it no longer needs to speak loudly. It can whisper under the floor of sleep. It can become dust, river, lamp smoke, and the soft turning of dreams. Let the tablets rest. Let the rivers pass. Let the old cities sink gently back into night. And perhaps somewhere beyond the edge of knowing, another fragment waits in the earth, patient, unread, and peaceful beneath the stars. End of script. Good night.